Yo, Atlas speaking, and welcome to part 7 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto and Became the Sage of Six-Path Successor. The playlist is above as usual, and with that being said, let the tale begin. Chapter 102, Art of a Kazekage. Farewell, Uzumaki. When I next see you standing, you will be one with my art, he shouted as the Sandaime Kazekage lurched forward and flew straight towards the blonde. He readied his blades and stood his ground, ready to intercept the puppet. Well, shit. Naruto cursed after blocking the several attacks from the puppet Sandaime. The pain in his leg was multiplying every time he moved and blocked the puppet's scythe. Kurama growled in Naruto's head. Can't do my job here if you keep ruining my work. Every time you take a hit it restarts the healing process, he growled at the blonde, struggling to fix Naruto's torn ACL. Naruto grimaced in pain as he tried to adjust his stance so he could be ready for the Kazekage's next attack. The puppet flew through the air in a wide arc before swooping down towards the blonde, scythe at the ready. Naruto grit his teeth and flexed his good leg. Just before the puppet got close enough to strike him, Naruto jumped to the side and rolled away. The blonde fought down the urge to scream as he felt the pain in his leg increase again. Damn it, brat! Sit still so I can heal you. Kurama roared at the blonde, frustrated that he wasn't finished yet. Naruto scoffed at the fox while he shook his head. Would if I could. He grumbled before his eyes widened. He looked over to the clone he's sitting in the barrier. He smirked before turning back to Sasori. The redhead narrowed his eyes at the blonde before Naruto closed his eyes. The puppeteer sent the Kazekage straight towards Naruto in an attempt to hit him while his eyes were closed, only to have his puppet blocked and then knocked back by the Uzumaki, all while his eyes were still closed. The blonde had a strange orange pigmentation around his eyes. The blonde took a deep breath before quickly opening his eyes, revealing a yellow iris with a bar-like pupil. There, Kurama, in this form I should be able to heal quicker. He grumbled to the fox. Kurama huffed and got back to work. Naruto could instantly feel the pain in his leg begin to fade as he resealed his swords. He crossed his arms over his chest and narrowed his eyes into a scowl at the puppeteer. So, Sasori. You ready for round 2? He growled at the redhead. Sasori just chuckled in response before readying the Kazekage for another attack. The puppet raised its right arm before it opened up into 4 flaps. Senjusobu, he called out as hundreds of arms shot out of seals within the arm. The arms elongated and charged straight for the Uzumaki. Naruto scowled at the attack before raising his own hand. Don't underestimate me. Senpu, Cho Otama Rasengan, he roared as a Rasengan formed in his hand. Moments before the arms hit him, the Rasengan expanded into the size of a small house, ripping the arms apart before they could make contact. Naruto winced slightly as he felt a dull pain in his leg, but it quickly passed as he cancelled his jutsu. Sasori growled before a smirk spread across his lips. Fine, if this is how you want to play. Then I'll just have to show you this puppet's ultimate ability, he said offhandedly while his fingers flicked and moved. The Kazekage puppet twitched slightly before its mouth opened. After a few seconds, and black, sand-like substance started to fall from the mouth of the puppet, piling on the ground around it. Once about a foot of sand covered the ground around the puppet, its mouth closed and a compartment on its chest opened. Blue fire-like churka began to spout out of the puppet's chest and the black sand began to move from beneath the puppet. Naruto's eyes widened as he readied himself for anything. How much longer, Kurama? He asked the fox in a rushed tone. 30 seconds, kid. He grumbled in return, concentrating on the injury. The sand around the puppet rose into the air and made odd cube and triangular shapes. Sasori began to chuckle darkly. This is Sandaime Kazaki's surprise jutsu. His favorite iron sands. Using this sand, he could use it to destroy just about any defense and make just about any weapon with it. A true work of art, he said as the shapes rose higher up in the air. Why don't I show you its power? He mused as he flicked his hand forward. A triangle of iron sand began to move slowly before it shot off towards Naruto like a bat out of hell. Naruto quickly used Hiraishin with a straight kunai to dodge the attack. But, Once he landed, he felt a pop in his knee of his injured leg. "Damn it," he hissed in pain. Kurama howled in anger in his mind. "Damn it, Kit. I was just about finished." Fuck, the fox started in a string of curses and mild threats as he began healing the leg again. Naruto winced a bit as he readied himself for another attack. He looked back to the triangle that attacked him and noticed that it embedded itself into the ground about 8 feet deep, smashing right through the hard rock-covered ground. Naruto gulped at the sight. Even in Sage mode he wouldn't be able to take a single hit from that. But then an idea came to him. The blonde smirked as he crossed his fingers. "Kagebunshin no Jutsu," he called and formed 6 clones. The clones each took a position around him, making a circle with the original in the center. The clones summoned their black katanas and stood in a ready stance while the original sat with an open scroll and an inkwell and brush. Sasori scowled at the blonde. "What do you think you are doing?" he asked the blonde in a mildly annoyed tone. Naruto smirked at him before he began to start on a seal. "You like to talk about art so much that the boss thought he should show you his art," one of the clones said with a smirk. Naruto's hand moved in a blur, effortlessly taking ink and applying it to paper with a certain expertise only an Uzumaki could hope to match. Sasori growled loudly as his hands began to work his chakra strings. "Like I would let you use that inferior art," he yelled as several of the cube and triangle-shaped iron sands shot off towards the blonde and his ring of clones. The clone readied their swords as a blue glow formed on the blades. Kanji spread across the blades as the clones tried to block the sands. As soon as the sand made contacts, the clones all shouted at the same time. "Fuinjutsu, Kyujin Fukin." Sealing style, absorbing blade sealing sword, they called, and the sand fell to the ground in large clumps as the chakra was sapped from the sands. Sasori's eyes widened in disbelief as he watched all of his iron sand fall to the ground, devoid of his chakra. "What the hell?" he roared in rage as he watched his puppet's strongest feature crumble. The blonde who had thwarted Sasori's attack snickered at his rage. "It's the same thing I used against Gaara. As soon as I remove the chakra in the iron sand, it becomes useless. Just a part of the ground again," he said with a light chuckle. Sasori was fuming. "Damn you, Uzumaki," he roared as he sent the Kazekage back in with its scythe, but on its other arm formed a large saw blade that began to spin. Naruto smirked as he let his clones dispel. He made a half-tiger seal and waited for the puppet to get close. "Fuinjutsu, Dai Uzumaki Hakai." Sealing style, Maelstrom Destruction, he called out as the puppet entered his range. The sealing matrix on the paper he was using began to spread across the ground until it came to the moving puppet. The matrix quickly moved from the ground and onto the puppet. Sasori's eyes widened when his puppet stopped moving. The seal completely covered the puppet. The body of the Kazekage began to shake as a small cloud formed around it. After a brief second, the winds around the puppet began to pick up until the puppet was lost in a small tornado of destruction. The puppet shattered from the force of the winds. It broke into hundreds of pieces, rendering it completely beyond repair. Sasori watched in amazement as his most powerful puppet was torn to pieces by the isolated storm. Naruto ended the jutsu and smirked at the red head. "Well, Sasori, is that all you got?" he asked with a cocky bravado. The red head snarled at the blonde. "Hardly," he growled out as he removed his cloak, revealing something that made Naruto's eyes widen as a small gasp escaped from his lips. Chapter 103, Art of 100 Puppets. The red head snarled at the blonde. "Hardly," he growled out as he removed his cloak, revealing something that made Naruto's eyes widen as a small gasp escaped from his lips. "This is why I am eternal," Sasori said in a low tone. "I spent years studying my art to find a way to make the perfect puppet. But little did I know that the perfect puppet." He started before he raised his arms, showing himself to Naruto. A metal cable extended from his stomach. 6 side blades extended from his back. His arms, chest, neck, and legs were segmented, making him look like a mannequin. And on his chest, where his heart should have been, was a cylinder that had the kanji 4 scorpion on it. Would be myself, he yelled as the metal cable slid below his feet, raising him up into the air. You are the first one, he said to Naruto. The first one to make me use myself since I joined the Akatsuki. You should feel honored to witness such a work of art, he said in a monotone voice as the life seemed to fade his eyes. Naruto nearly gagged. I think I feel more sick than honored. Your art is just disgusting, he declared and readied himself. Sasori growled and reached his arms out towards Naruto. His hands began to spin at a fast rate before a powerful jet of water burst out from his palms. Naruto's eyes widened before a smirk grew on his face. He waited for the last second to hurration away from the water. The jets of water cut through the stone ground like a knife through paper, tearing up the ground and cutting away where Naruto once stood. Sasori's eyebrows rose when he saw Naruto a little further away to his left, testing out his leg. Looks like I'm all healed up, Sasori, he said as he bent and stretched out his leg. Time to actually start then, he exclaimed as his chakra cloak returned to him. Sasori cursed as he pulled a scroll from his back. The redhead opened the scroll and quickly began to form hand signs. No holding back then. Let's finish this. Akahiji, Hyaki no Son, he roared as smoke erupted from the scroll. Naruto stared with a critical eye as the smoke cleared. Once the smoke was gone, Sasori was surrounded by dozens of puppets. And if the name of his jutsu was a hint to anything, Naruto could guess there were 100. So Uzumaki? Do you think you can stand up to my art? The redhead called as a hatch on his chest to the right of his core opened. Once it opened, hundreds of chakra threads shot out from the cavity and attached themselves to the 100 puppets. Now! Face my art, he cackled as the puppets moved in unison, forming a mob of puppets charging after the blonde. Naruto sighed and shook his head. Nothing's going to be easy, is it? He said as he made several chakra arms that began to create Raisengans behind him. Is it ever? Kurama questioned with a smirk. Naruto shook his head again before crouching on th ground. I guess not. The mob of puppets were getting closer to the blonde, just as he finished forming 10 Raisengans. Raisengan, he called and used his chakra arms to send the 10 chakra orbs through several puppets. But it didn't stop them though. The mob continued, leading the destroyed puppets to build themselves back together. Naruto threw a Hiraishin kunai above the horde before flashing to it, just as they reached him. How about we take out the puppeteer, he called, forming a half-tiger seal. Futon, Kazakiri no Jutsu, he called and swiped his hand through the air, sending a razor-sharp wave of wind towards the red-headed puppet master. Sasori used the metal cable to propel himself back and avoided the attack. He then made his right hand spin as he shot flame from his palm. Naruto summoned one of his swords and absorbed the flames with it. He then threw the sword into the air and made 3 quick hand signs. Tiger Monkey Horse. Rebound, he called as the sword stopped in mid-air and pointed towards Sasori. Flames erupted from the blade and shot straight towards the puppeteer. Sasori scoffed and used 2 of his 100 puppets as shields. You'll have to do better than that, Uzumaki, he called in a bored tone before his eyes snapped wide. You mean like this? Naruto said from behind the puppeteer, planting a Kurama-enhanced fist in his back. Sasori's body shattered into pieces as his puppet army fell lifelessly to the ground. Naruto sighed in disappointment. One shot and done, huh? Whatever. He huffed as he began to walk away, dispelling his cloak. He made a few steps before his instincts kicked in, making him Hiraishin away. It isn't over yet, kid. Kurama warned in a foreboding tone. Naruto frowned and looked back to the scattered pieces of Sasori. He looked to Sasori's head and his eyes widened. The puppet master's head smiled at the blonde before speaking. Like I told you, my art is eternal, Uzumaki. You cannot kill me, he called before his body began to come back together, clicking back into place. Sasori reconnected to his army and began to laugh at the blonde. My art will never die, Uzumaki, he roared as he sent his army after Naruto yet again, but this time they weren't alone. Several Zetsu clones joined the mix, some living, some being controlled by Sasori. The main force of the puppets split into two groups, swooping around to Naruto's sides as 12 puppets and a few dozen Zetsu charged from the front. Naruto cracked his neck and rolled his shoulders, letting Kurama's chakra re-enter his system. "Alright then, round 5, I guess, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he called, making 2 clones of himself to take on the pincer attack while he handled the enemies in front of him. He and his clone started running through hand signs before taking a deep breath. "Katan, Karyo Inden. Suetun, Surya no Jutsu. Futon, Rinkuden." He and his clones called out, shooting a fire and water dragon towards the pincer attack while ripping the forward attack to pieces with a massive air bullet. Naruto then threw his Hiraishin kunai into the air before running through more hand signs. As soon as the kunai began to fall, he finished his hand signs. "Kunai Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," he called, turning his one falling kunai into a figurative rain of steel. Sasori used his side blades to block and avoid the kunai, but was unprepared for Naruto to flash in front of him and drive a Rasengan into his stomach, destroying his metal cable and busting him into pieces again. As Sasori flew through the air, he reformed himself and landed while shooting water towards the Uzumaki. Naruto held up a Hiraishin kunai and a sealing matrix spread through the air, absorbing the jutsu and redirecting it to another kunai. Sasori growled and used his chakra threads to take control of several pieces of debris to use as weapons, but as soon as they got close they turned out to be Naruto clone, ones that began to glow. "Kage Bunshin Daibakuha," Naruto called as the 7 clones Sasori had exploded, sending him into pieces yet again. But like he had before, he brought himself back together. Naruto growled before sensing something. He honed his senses on Sasori and noticed that all of his chakra was focused onto the strange cylinder in his chest. Kurama scoffed in Naruto's head. "Looks like you finally figure it out. That's his weak spot, take that out and he'll die," he huffed in annoyance. Naruto just nodded in response before forming a Rasengan in his hand. "It's time to die, Sasori," he called as he dashed forward. The redhead growled before charging Naruto. "I cannot die. My art is eternal," he roared as he cocked his fist back to punch the Uzumaki. But as soon as he swung, Naruto flashed away, to the seal he had planted on the puppet master's back. Sasori tried to turn his head to see the blonde behind him, but was planted into the ground as his core shattered from Naruto's Rasengan. Sasori's dying scream was drowned out by a massive explosion coming from where Guy and Kakashi were fighting Deidara. Chapter 104, Origami Angel. Sasori tried to turn his head to see the blonde behind him, but was planted into the ground as his core shattered from Naruto's Rasengan. Sasori's dying scream was drowned out by a massive explosion coming from where Guy and Kakashi were fighting Deidara. 20 minutes earlier. With Jiraiya. "Ninpu, Ranjishigami no Jutsu," Jiraiya called out while facing off against his former student, Konan. His long white hair began to twitch and expand before it launched straight for the flying woman. His hair formed to have a dragon's features as it charged towards the self-proclaimed angel. Konan narrowed her eyes as the beast made of hair caught her in its jaws, effectively trapping her. Jiraiya shook his head with a sigh. "I expected more from you, Konan. You haven't improved at all, I've seen," he sighed in disappointment. Konan leveled a calm gaze towards the Toad Sage. "No, Sensei, it is you who has not improved over the years," she said as his skin began to change color. After a moment her skin began to float away in small squares of paper until she was no longer within Jiraiya's grasp. Jiraiya's eyes widened as he recalled his hair to its normal state. He looked around him and noticed that the paper in the air began to pick up speed as it floated around him and Gamma Bunta in a cyclone around the two. Bunta scowled as he watched the paper. "This is bad, Jiraiya," he grumbled while readying himself for whatever Konan was about to do. Jiraiya could only nod in agreement as he waited for Konan's attack. "Shikigami no Mai," Konan's voice called out from seemingly everywhere. Jiraiya and Bunta upped their defense as they continued to wait. "Sensei, I do not wish to kill you," Konan's voice called. "But if you do not yield, then I will have no choice." Jiraiya let out a low and long sigh. "I can't submit to you, Konan. I have a mission to complete." And it seems that I have let my little students get out of hand, he said in a stern voice. Fine then, sensei. I am sorry for this. Shikigami no mai, Successor. Conan's voice called as the paper around Bunta and Jiraiya stopped moving. The paper began to gather and form small spears made of paper that all pointed at the summons and Jiraiya. Jiraiya and his summons eyes widened as they looked at the hundreds of spears pointed at them. Not good. Jiraiya breathed out. And then the spears flew through the sky towards the two of them. Gamabunta cursed loudly as he reacted as fast as he could. He used his tongue to grab Jiraiya off the top of his head and take him into his mouth to avoid the attack. Gamabunta growled in pain as he felt the spears stab him all across his body. As soon as the spears stopped their attacks, Bunta opened his mouth and let Jiraiya out onto the ground. The Toad Sage looked at his longtime friend and partner to see him covered in wounds and breathing heavily. I have to retreat, Jiraiya. Good luck. The summon said while in pain before he dispelled in a plume of smoke. Jiraiya growled as he looked to where Conan was reforming her body. You're gonna pay for that, Conan, he growled. Conan's upper body formed completely, leaving her lower body as a paper cyclone. Is this all that you have to offer against me, sensei? Conan asked in her monotone voice. Pain-sama would be disappointed in you. He sighed as she gathered more paper around her. Shikigami no mai, Yuzu Ryu, she called as her paper formed a cyclone around her before blasting towards Jiraiya. Jiraiya growled before he began making hand signs. Katan, Karyo Inden, he roared as he shot out a bullet of flame. The flame and paper crashed and cancelled each other out. Conan scowled at the Sannin before disappearing in a flurry of paper. Jiraiya waited for the smoke to clear. But as soon as it did, it revealed a horde of white Zensus running straight for him. Jiraiya growled before taking the taijutsu stance of the toads. Damn. Looks like I'm in a tight spot here. He mused. But this will make one hell of a book if I live through this, he said with a confident smirk. The first of the Zetsu made it near him before he leaped into action. The first of the clones went down from a flying kick to the face. It was sent through the air and crashed into two other of the Zetsu. Jiraiya let out a laugh as he began to rip through the Zetsu horde. A backhand to one's head sent it spiraling through the air. A palm strike to the nose killed one on impact. Kick to the stomach. Chop to the neck. Rasengan to the torso. A flame bomb to a group of 5. It seemed as though Jiraiya was tearing the hordes apart. Until a sheet of paper appeared behind him. Jiraiya crashed his fist into a white Zetsu's head as he felt a sharp pain rush through his side. Gra, he growled as he touched his side and felt blood. But he couldn't stop to ponder the injury. He still had Zetsus to face. He fought through his pain to continue facing the horde. He created a Rasengan and smashed it against another Zetsu. And yet again he felt a sting of pain run across his leg. He hissed in pain before leaping away from a group of charging Zetsu. He landed on his good leg and gingerly tested his other. He groaned slightly, but it was workable. Kuchios no Jutsu, he called as he summoned a second toad to fight for him. Before the smoke cleared, a club came down onto the horde, scattering their forces. All right, Gamaken. Let's take them apart, he called as the smoke cleared. I am not very graceful, but I will do my best. Gamaken shouted as he brought down his club yet again onto the horde, smashing more of the Zetsu. Jiraiya took his moment of rest to check over his injuries. He had a deep cut on his side and a more shallow one on his leg. Damn Conan. Why don't you fight fairly? He grumbled to himself as he stood on top of Gamaken. Come on out, Conan, he called. These little pests can't beat me. The Zetsu below him growled as they came together in several groups. They began to morph together until there were several giants standing in Gamaken's path. Oh really, one called in its crazed and happy voice. Jiraiya's eyes widened as the giants began to morph together as well. Kin! Take them down now! Jiraiya yelled in a furious tone. Right! Gamaken called as he jumped high into the air and brought down his club. only for a cyclone of paper to appear before the summons and knock it away from the forming giant. Gah! Gamaken cried out as he crashed into the earth. Jiraiya jumped from his summons before he was knocked away at the last second, jumping high above the Zetsu giant. Otama Rasengan, he roared as he formed a Rasengan the size of a small house and brought it down on top of the giant's head. The Zetsu cried out in pain as it was torn apart by the rotating sphere of chakra. Jiraiya roared as he tore the giant apart. Jiraiya landed hard onto the ground after destroying the Zetsu. He tried to stand but fell to a knee, panting in exhaustion. Damn, I'm too old for this shit, he growled out between breaths. Gamaken got up from his back and lumbered over to Jiraiya. Are you alright, Jiraiya-sama? He called to his summoner. He reached down and placed Jiraiya back onto his head. Jiraiya got his breathing back under control and nodded to his summons. Thanks, Ken, I'm just a little tired is all, but this isn't over yet. He growled as he watched Konan form in front of him and Gamaken. You did well, Jiraiya-sensei. But, I do believe it is time we finish this, she said to him in a grave tone. Jiraiya nodded with a frown. Let's, he said before making hand signs. Kuchios no Jutsu. Chapter 105, Jiraiya the Gallant. You did well, Jiraiya-sensei. But, I do believe it is time we finish this, she said to him in a grave tone. Jiraiya nodded with a frown. Let's, he said before making hand signs. Kuchios no Jutsu. Konan watched as smoke enveloped her former sensei with a frown. What was he planning? He was already low on chakra and was injured. No summons he could hope to face her. So what was he planning? A voice brought her out of her thoughts. Hey Jiraiya-chan, been a while, an elderly male voice said through the smoke. Yeah, ever since you and Naruto-chan left you haven't talked to us. And why do you have Ta always summon us in weird places like this? An elderly female voice complained. The smoke began to clear as Jiraiya chuckled at the voices. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. But, I'm going to need you help, ma'am, to put an old student of mine back in her place. Jiraiya said as the smoke cleared to reveal two small and elderly-looking toads on the sage's shoulders. Fukasaku looked at Konan with an amused smirk. Oh, so this is the last that knocked old Bunt on his ass, huh? Well, Jiraiya-chan, we better get started then, the elder toad said as he and Shima clasped their hands together and started gathering natural chakra. Before Konan's eyes, her old sensei began to change. His features shifted and became more rugged. His hands became webbed and his feet morphed into those of a toad's. His eyes bulged slightly and gained a bar-like pupil. He grew a beard and his nose became more bulbous. His teeth sharpened and his hair came loose from its ponytail. He looked at Konan and smirked. Well, Konan, how do I look? He asked in a sarcastic tone. The blue hair angle of the Akatsuki scowled at the man. She could feel the power radiating from him as his old wounds began to close. You look rather horrid if I do say so myself, she replied to her former sensei, getting a mock pout out of the man. Sensei, give up, she said bluntly to the man. Even in this state you cannot defeat me. You have lost too much chakra. Give up. Jiraiya looked at his former student for a long moment before crouching on Gamaken's head. Give up, he said as his legs tenses and his muscles tightened. Stop trying. He growled. To make me give up, he roared as he launched himself towards Konan faster than she could react. His kick connected with the side of her head, sending her crashing into the hard ground below, forming a crater on impact. Never underestimate your elders, Konan. It'll be the death of you. Konan coughed as she spat out blood. She slowly rose to stand and glared at her former sensei. I see, then I will no longer hold back against you, sensei, she growled as she rose her hands up towards Jiraiya. Paper chakram, she called as paper squares gathered around her. A second later 7 chakrams made of paper cycled around her as she glared at Jiraiya. For Pain-sama, she called as the chakrams flew with great speed. Dodge him, Jiraiya-chan. Even in Sage mode those'll do a lot of damage. Fukasaku warned. Jiraiya nodded with a serious look on his face. Right, he shouted as he jumped high over the first of the chakrams. Just before he landed, the second was getting close, but Shima used a wind jutsu to knock it off course. Jiraiya jumped to his right to sidestep the third and ducked under the fourth. The fifth and sixth came at him from the sides as the seventh chakram rushed him from the front. Fukasaku and Shima used fire and wind jutsu to destroy the chakrams from the sides, while Jiraiya formed a Rasengan to intercept the seventh chakram. Once those three were destroyed, he looked back to Conan with a confident smirk. That all? He taunted his former student. Only for his sage instincts to warn him of danger. Jiraiya-chan, jump! Shima called. The Sannin jumped into the air as a chakram raced past him. What? Jiraiya breathed as he noticed the four that weren't destroyed were still moving in the air towards him. Shit, he called as another chakram came towards him while he was in the air. Fukasaku used a low-powered wind jutsu to knock it off course, only for it to come back around in a tight curve and smash into Jiraiya's back. Gag! Jiraiya coughed as the chakram sliced across his back, cutting deeply into his skin. Without his sage mode, he would most likely have been bisected by the paper blade, but instead he was deeply wounded. The Sannin landed on the ground and fell to a knee before the other three chakrams came towards him. Hari Jaizo! Jiraiya called as his hair spread over his body, making a spiked shield around him and the Toad Elders. The chakrams were all caught in his spiked hair as he opened it enough for him and the elders to counter. Senpu, Gomen, he and the elders called as Jiraiya shot forth oil, Shima lit it with fire, and Fukasaku intensified the flames with wind. The boiling oil cascaded over the chakrams and even caught the lone chakram with it. The paper blades were burnt away as the oil spread towards their master. Conan took to the skies as fast as she could to avoid the oil. She formed several paper shuriken and launched them towards the opening in Jiraiya's defenses. The Sannin cursed as he was only able to cover the elders before the blades got close. He moved his head enough so that one would only cut across his cheek while another glanced off his Hittite. A third shuriken, however, stabbed into his shoulder next to his neck and made it through his sage mode's thick skin. Damn, he hissed in pain. He jumped back as Gamaken swung his club down on Conan. The paper angel just let her body turn to paper and flow around the club. As she dodged the summon's attack, she sent several papers over to Gamaken and stuck them to his legs. Ken looked to his legs and noticed they were paper bombs. Ken! Jiraiya called out as Gamaken was enveloped in a massive explosion. The summons dispelled as soon as he took the damage so he could heal, leaving Jiraiya injured and almost out of chakra. Even with Fukasaku and Shima, he was running on fumes. Damn it, he cursed as he felt his sage mode slipping. If it weren't for those damn Zetsu. He panted as his Hari Jaizo receded. This ain't good, Jiraiya-chan. You can't keep up sage mode like this. Fukasaku grumbled as he noticed Jiraiya's condition. We need to retreat, Jiraiya-chan. Get to the medic. Shima said to him. Jiraiya fell to a knee as he looked at Conan. She wasn't in much of a better shape than he was. His earlier kick did a lot of damage, while controlling 7 chakrams took a ton of chakra. She was in her human form looking at Jiraiya, panting in exhaustion. Jiraiya grimaced as he tried to get up. Unless you can carry me, I think we might have a problem, he grumbled as his sage mode finally ended. He couldn't move from the wound on his back. Fukasaku snorted at him. You know I can carry your ass. But if the little girl would let us get away is another question. Fukasaku mused as he hopped off of Jiraiya's shoulder and picked him up slightly. Shima also hopped off and helped carry him. Oh no you don't! Conan exclaimed as she formed more paper shuriken. But before she could launch them towards Jiraiya, she was thrown off balance by a massive explosion that reached up to the sky. She looked over to where the explosion happened. Deidara, she called out as she figured out who just self-destructed. Another loud explosion caught her as she turned to see Sasori be destroyed from across the battlefield. Damn it, she cursed as she watched 2 of her comrades fall. Jiraiya chuckled. Looks like you guys are losing, he said to the angel of the Akatsuki. She growled at him before something happened. The sound of thousands of birds filled the area as Jiraiya and Konan tried to find the source. Konan was the one to find it, as a Chidori stuck straight through her chest. She coughed up blood as the hand encased in lighting pulled itself out of her chest. She fell to the ground, her head facing the direction of Pain's battle against Cole. Naga, too, she said before her eyes rolled back and she went limp on the ground. Jiraiya watched as his former student died on the ground. He looked up to see a raven-haired Uchiha that was thought to be dead stand over her with an emotionless expression. Uchiha Sasuke looked to the injured Sannin and pointed his sword towards the man. Jiraiya of the Sannin. Perhaps you can prove just how much I have improved. Chapter 106, The Rinnegan. Uchiha Sasuke looked to the injured Sannin and pointed his sword towards the man. Jiraiya of the Sannin. Perhaps you can prove just how much I have improved. Cole cursed as he landed on the ground. This is going to be annoying, he grumbled as he looked to the 6 paths of pain. They all stood atop a giant crab and looked down on Cole. The Deva path stepped forward and narrowed his eyes at Cole. I don't know how you acquired eyes similar to mine, but you will know pain all the same. You cannot hope to kill a god, he said in his deep rumbling voice as he brought his hand up and pointed his palm towards Cole. Bancho Tennin, he called. Cole instantly felt the shift in gravity as it pulled on him. He merely scoffed as held his hand up. Shinra Tensei, he retaliated, sending a shock wave of invisible force at the 6 paths, using the Bancho Tennin to his advantage. The crab summons was sent flying through the air as the 6 paths scattered. Save the Deva path who was caught in the blast. He flew with the crab and landed hard on his back. The animal path slammed his hands on the ground and summoned a massive rhino and goat. The 2 summons charged Cole, who scoffed and raised both hands. Ashura path, twin cannons, he called as his arms turned into chakra cannons. The cannons shot twin blasts of pure chakra at the 2 summons, blasting them into pieces before they could even come close to Cole's position. Come on, Nagato. You have all this power and no imagination. I mean, really? A giant fucking crab. The fuck kind of summons is that? Cole yelled in abort irritation. Let me show you a real summons worthy of the Rinnegan, he called as he slammed his hand down on the ground. Kuchios no Jutsu, Behemoth, he called as smoke covered the landscape. The 6 paths of pain all grouped up to face the new threat as the smoke cleared. Once the smoke dispersed, it revealed a massive beast that was the combination of an ox and a lin. Its horns sparked with lightning as it growled at the paths. Cole looked down at the group with an unimpressed scowl. I thought you'd be better than his Nagato. Well, whatever I guess, he said as he waved the 6 off. Sick him, he told his summons as it let loose a deafening roar. Behemoth channeled lightning into its horns and blasted a massive ball of pure plasma at the group. The Pretapath stepped forward and absorbed to attack, but was too slow to dodge the beast's claws. The other 5 dodged when Behemoth brought down its claw-enhanced attack, but the Pretapath was crushed underneath the creature. Deva raised his hands as Ashura turned his arms into rockets. Shinra Tensei. Deva roared, sending Behemoth flying into the air. Ashura then went to launch 20 rockets at the beast. Once the rockets hit, Behemoth was enveloped in an explosive fire that damaged the beast greatly. Naraka Path made his way over to the Preta Path and summoned the King of Hell to revive him. Cole floated back down to the ground and gave the paths an appraising look. You defeated one of my summons? This might be more interesting than I thought, he mused as he readied Tekihocho and turned it into a Naginata. Come on then. Show me what you can really do, he called out as he rushed to the 6 with his weapon at the ready. The Ashura Path formed a cannon on his arm and shot a beam of chakra towards Cole. The Oracle, however, used his superior visual power to absorb the beam while running towards the paths. He formed 5 truth-seeking balls and shot them towards the paths, attacking the Deva Path with his own weapon. The paths used their linked eyesight to dodge the orbs while trying to attack Cole. Cole, however, also linked his eyesight to a small spider he summoned while on Behemoth's back to have a perfect view of the battlefield. He ducked under a kick that was meant for the back of his head and brought up the end of his naginata and caught the Predapath in the jaw, sending him flying. Cole then used a low-powered Shinra Tensei to intercept a flurry of rockets from the Ashura Path. While he was fighting the Ashura Path, he willed his truth-seeking balls to continue their assault on the Pains. The orbs flew through the air in attempts to strike the paths, but they continued to dodge. Cole was finally able to catch the Ashura Path with a leg sweep and pin the mechanical path to the ground with the Tekihocho before channeling lightning chakra into the blade, frying the path completely. He left the charged blade in the path and continued his assault barehanded. His next target was the Naraka Path. As long as that one still lived, he might as well be fighting a group of immortals. He dashed past the Predapath and cocked back his fists to strike the Predapath, but was knocked away by the Devapath. While Cole flew through the air, he started forming hand signs until he landed. Katon, Karyo Inden, he roared and summoned up a massive dragon of flame. The flame shot towards the animal path and engulfed the path. The Predapath was too busy defending the Naraka Path to absorb the attack to the other path. Cole switched his target to the human path as he summoned another truth-seeking ball. This time the orb morphed into a Shikujo. Cole spun the staff in his hand and charged towards the path. The Devapath tried again to knock Cole away, but was struck by a clone Cole had made earlier in the fight and hid in the earth using Dochu Eigyo. The clone sprang from the ground using one of Naruto's old moves. Ninpu, Doria Bunshin. Ninja Art, Earth Dragon Clone, the clone called out as it shot forth a fireball towards the Devapath. Deva spun around at the last second and blocked the attack with the Shinra Tensei he was trying to use against the original. The original Cole continued on his path towards the human path and struck him with his Shikujo. The path's neck was broken on the impact as he fell to the ground. Cole turned back to the Naraka and Predapath and threw a chakra receiving rod at the Predapath. He dodged the spike and caught it in midair, not noticing the explosive tag until it was too late. The explosion blew the path's arm clean off and sent him flying away from the Naraka Path. Now with only 2 pairs of eyes, the Naraka Path couldn't keep up with the 5 truth-seeking balls trying to strike him. The first struck his knee, breaking his leg on impact. Once he was immobilized, the other 4 crushed him to the ground quickly. Cole gave a sigh before turning towards the Devapath. "So, Nagato. Was this the best you can do?" he mocked as he took in his defeated foes. The only one left standing was the Devapath, but that didn't mean he was out of the fight. The Devapath was the most powerful of the 6, and now that Nagato no longer needed to control the other 5, he could focus all of his power on Deva. The Devapath narrowed his eyes at Cole. This was unforeseen. He growled. Cole shrugged at the path. "You underestimated me, Nagato. Something I am surprised you would do. Have you not figured out I was stronger than you after all I have done to the Akatsuki? I killed 2 people that were thought to be immortal. I made one of your most loyal members defect. I had a mole in you group since day 1. And I even know you aren't the one really in charge." "No, that would be Toby," Cole explained in an exasperated tone. "Honestly, were you that caught up in your god act that you didn't really think I was that much of a threat?" he asked incredulously. Deva lowered his head before taking a deep breath. "Yes, it seems I underestimated you. But no more. I will finish this en dash," he started to say before an explosion rocked the earth. Cole and Deva both looked to the massive explosion caused by Deidara. Cole's eyes widened. "Gai," he called as he felt Gai's chakra disappear. Cole dashed to Gai's previous location in an attempt to save the man. Deva looked on as the last of his members fell to their opponents. But what caught his eye was a floating piece of paper that flew past him. The paper was red in color, small, and square. Deva looked to the direction of where the paper came from and saw Conan lying dead on the ground next to Saskia, who had charged a second Chidori and drove it through the beaten Jiraiya. He fell to his knees, not wanting to believe in what he was seeing. His organization fell before his eyes. His closest friend lay dead on the ground. His former sensei and father figure was being killed before his very eyes. And he was beaten and defeated by a man with the same eyes as him. What is this pain? Chapter 107, Everything Goes to Hell. He fell to his knees, not wanting to believe in what he was seeing. His organization fell before his eyes. His closest friend lay dead on the ground. His former sensei and father figure was being killed before his very eyes. And he was beaten and defeated by a man with the same eyes as him. What is this pain? Naruto had just crushed Sasori's core when he felt two things. First was the shockwave from the explosion caused by Deidara. That knocked him across the battlefield like a rag doll. Once he finally stopped bouncing across the ground, he felt a second thing. Well, it was more like the lack of the second thing struck him. He could no longer sense Madogai. Not a trace. Not even a single hint of the green-clad man's existence. He was just gone. The blonde turned to where the blast came from and made a mad dash for the last place he had felt the green beast of Konoha. Sakura was busy taking the poison out of Sarutobi Hiruzen to notice the lack look on Kakashi's face when the explosion happened. But she didn't miss his words. Damn it, I failed, damn it, I failed again. He sobbed as he crashed his fist onto the ground hard enough to make a small crater under it. Damn it all to hell. Rah! Nagato sat in his hidden base, alone. Sitting in the machine that kept him alive. A blank look on his face as he contemplated what had happened. He failed. He lost all of his members. Either from betrayal, assassination, or from this current battle. All that remained was himself, Madara, and the Uchiha's little lapdog Raiga. His path to pain, to show the entire world the pain he had felt, turned left so fast it flung him from the road and sent him over the edge. He lost. He lost it all. Yahiko, Konan, he wasn't even able to make his final peace with his sensei. It was all due to the meddling of two men. Madara. If it wasn't for him, he would be the Amikage. He would still have Konan by his side. Hell, he might have even had Yahiko with him still. But no! The Uchiha decided to turn the Akatsuki into his personal hit squad and turn their beliefs in for the betterment of his own agenda. And then there was the one called the Oracle. If it wasn't for his early interruption of his plans, he could be having a worldwide peace. One where the world knew pain, and chose not to continue feeling such pain. A world that had felt enough loss, enough sorrow, to throw away their petty grievances and live in coexistence. Live in peace. But no! He stuck his nose in where he didn't belong. He killed his members. He turned them against one another. And was worst of all, he completely decimated him and his forces. Almost as if he knew that he would do exactly what he planned. The Oracle kept the Akatsuki from gaining any of the bijou, save the Sanbai, and humiliated them at the same time. No more. Nagato wouldn't take this anymore. He had lost it all. But he wasn't going down alone. He would take everyone with him. He would destroy them all, so that he could at least die with dignity. He brought his hands together to form a single hand sign. Chibaku Tensei. Jiraiya of the Sannin, maybe you can help show me how far I have come. Sasuke mused as he created a second Chidori in his palm. Jiraiya paled at the sight. There stood the before-believed dead Uchiha. He wore a black cloak that had large hood that covered most of the Uchiha's face. Save his right eye, that glowed red with three tomo that spun slowly as he gazed at the injured sage. The youth also wielded a guardless katana on his hip. The two elder toad sages saw the new danger and stood to protect their summoner. Sorry boy, but you're gonna have to get past us to get to Jiraiya-chan here. Fukasawa said in a dark tone as he took a fighting stance. Shima stood proudly next to her husband with a look of determination. Sasuke looked at the two amphibians and scoffed. You're hardly worth my time, move, he ordered the two toad summons. Fukasaku laughed at the boy. You think we're scared of some punk kid who dash, he started to say before he felt an invisible force knock him far away from his summoner. Shima gasped loudly and watched as her husband flew across the battlefield. "PA!" she yelled in worry. She turned back to the Uchiha but couldn't see him anymore. Jiraiya's eyes widened as he watched Sasuke disappear in a blur of speed. "Ma'am, look out," he warned just before Shima was brutally kicked out of the way by the Uchiha. Jiraiya cursed loudly before forcing himself to stand. He would not be brought down by some punk that joined the fight at the last second. He panted as he raised his right arm. A Rasengan slowly formed in his palm as he glared at the Uchiha. "You'll pay for that, brat." Now faced the great Toad Sage of Myobokuzan, he roared as he used the last of his strength to push off towards the boy. He put all he had left into his attack, but it fell short. His strength gave out at the last possible second. His Rasengan dispelled harmlessly as he began to fall forward. "Damn it," he said as he fell. Sasuke scoffed at the man. "Pathetic, die you fool," he said as he drove his lightning-cased hand through the man's heart. Cole ran through the blast zone, straight to the epicenter. He frantically looked for anything he could use to bring the man back. As long as the King of Hell had some flesh to chew, he could bring anyone back from the dead soon after death. Cole looked through the scorched earth in hopes of finding Guy's body. But his hopes were dashed completely. He failed. He knew this mission was dangerous, but he was confident he could get everyone out alive. But now he had a poison Hokage, an injured Kakashi, an unknown status on Jiraiya, and one casualty. All that was left of the mighty green beast of Konoha was a single shred of his green jumpsuit. It stuck to a rock as the wind blew on it. Almost like a green leaf that had fallen early to the ground, before its autumn could change it to the aged red color. It had fallen too soon, and now it wasn't even able to become to soil for the next generation of leaves to grow from, to aspire to become. Miyato Guy's springtime of youth was cut short. He fell to his knees and held the single piece of green in a sea of brown. Tears silently fell down his face as he looked back on his past experiences with the man. He, Guy, and Kakashi, we all the best of friends once Cole came to the elemental nations. They even had a poker night every Saturday. Now, what would he tell everyone when their spitfire of youthfulness never came back to play another round? Naruto came up next to his father. A look of shock on his eyes as he took in his distressed image. "Dad?" he asked hesitantly, not wanting to know what the answer he would be told. Cole shook his head before his voice croaked. "He's gone, Naruto, gone, and nothing I can do will change that," he said in utter defeat. Naruto joined his father and put a hand on his shoulder. He tried to say something, but his tears caught in his throat. He'd never see Uncle Guy again. It was then they felt it. The earth began to tremor and shake. Cole could feel a massive amount of power building up from where the Deva path was. He whipped his head around to see the earth itself, rising to the heavens, forming a large mass of earth and fury in the sky above. "You will know my pain. I will show you all the pain I have felt before I take you with me," Deva Path called out in utter fury. The ground around Cole and his son began to rise. This was not good. The earth all over the ruined village of Sunagakure rose to the sky, forming a miniature planet in the sky, almost the size of the village itself. Cole and Naruto rushed to Sakura and the other injured members of their party. Naruto summoned clones to carry and assist them to escape from the rising earth. Gamahiro dispelled as soon as the earth began to rise, as not to be caught by the magnetic pull of the Chibaku Tensei. Everyone was in accounting for, all save a certain perverted sage. Naruto looked around as fast as he could for the sage, but when he found him, he couldn't believe his eyes. There holding the sage over his shoulder was his former teammate, but that didn't catch his eye at first. What he saw first was red. The red of blood that spilled from Jiraiya's chest, and the same red that coated Sasuke's hands. All logical reasoning was lost to the blonde as he looked to his former friend, now holding his dying godfather. And with a rage-filled roar, he charged. Seiaswasuki. Chapter 108, Old Friends New Powers. All logical reasoning was lost to the blonde as he looked to his former friend, now holding his dying godfather. and with a rage-filled roar, he charged. Sayaswasuki! The raven-haired Uchiha turned to where his voice was called just in time to receive a blow to the face. The strike was hard enough for him to be sent flying back across the ruined field that was once the market district of Sunagakure. The Uchiha lost his hold on the dying Sannin that was over his shoulder as he flew back and crashed against a rising chunk of earth. He shook off the groggy feeling he had from the strike and dislodged himself from the floating landmass. He fell a few meters before gently landing on his feet. He looked to the poor fool who had the gall to strike him and found his old teammate giving him a glare that could scare death himself. Killing intent radiated from the boy as his golden chakra covered his skin. His blue eyes turned a yellow-orange color as his pupil became slit and his sage's cloak blew in a non-existent wind. Sasuke smirked at the enraged blonde. "Oh, Naruto. Well, at least one of you can land a hit on me, it seems." That pathetic excuse for a Sannin barely had the strength in him to fight some girl of the Akatsuki. Honestly, the Sannin must be very overrated if one of them can't even take down some girl, he scoffed as an evil glint came to his eyes. "So, Naruto. Do you want to help me with something? You see, I recently got this new power that I have been trying to understand and I want to test it out. So, would you mind dying for me?" he asked in a nonchalant tone to the blonde. Naruto bristled at the Uchiha's words. "Sasuke, we were friends. Whatever Tobi did to you, I swear, he will pay for it." Naruto growled lowly at the Uchiha. Cole walked over to his son and knelt beside him. He gave Jiraiya a quick once-over and let out a relieved sigh. All was not lost. "Naruto," he said, gaining his son's attention. He reached out his arms, a sign to hand the man over to him. "I can still heal him. He hasn't left us yet." "Old fool's resilient like that," he said with a smirk while taking Jiraiya from the blonde's arms. Cole summoned a clone to take Jiraiya away from the battlefield. While the clone was doing that, the original gave Sasuke a meaningful glance. "Handle your friend Naruto. I'll take care of the planet above our heads," he said as he gave his son's shoulder a squeeze. And then he made his way away from the two teenagers. Sasuke scowled at Cole's back and raised his hand. "You! Don't ignore me," he yelled in fury at the older man. As Cole walked away he felt a tug at his back, the pull increased in power slowly until he felt like he was being dragged back. It couldn't be. Cole whipped his head around and snarled at the Uchiha. He raised his hand and made a flicking motion with his wrist. "Don't you dare use my own techniques against me with this pathetic amount of power," he snarled at the teen that he had sent flying with a flick of his wrist. He then turned to Naruto with a hard-set expression. "Naruto, watch out for his eyes." "I don't trust the left," he said before he took off in a blur of speed. Naruto turned to the recovering Uchiha and pulled out a Hiraishin kunai. "So team, you ready for old time's sake?" he asked his old teammate. A scowl pressing hard into his face. Sasuke scoffed at the blonde and readied his sword. "Let's see if you can keep up, dope," he responded, a similar scowl present. It was so quiet, a pin could drop and it would be heard all around. And then, at an unspoken command, they dashed forwards to their opponent. Cole dashed over the ruined and rising earth towards his target. The final path of pain. The Deva path. He needed to finish this quickly so he could deal with the impending doom that would be raining on them at any moment. It was just like all the other Rinnegan users. They start to lose and get but hurt about it, so what do? Blow everything up with a meteor. Yeah, all's good with that ending. Cole had seen what this jutsu could do against an entire army. He was not about to be a singular target of it. No way, no how. He was also not going to lose anyone else on this mission. One casualty was already too many. He grew a determined look in his eyes and continued to run through the field of destruction. At one point the earth underneath him began to rise up into the air. So he decided to take to the skies. Nagato may have a strong affinity to the Deva path, but he was still miles behind Cole's visual prowess. So, even with the strange gravity fields that the Chibaku Tensei was causing, he overpowered it with his own and flew through the air towards his target. He stopped once he was directly above the orange-haired corpse. The man was still yelling, putting his maximum effort into his technique. And it was nearly complete. "That's enough," Cole roared as he brought his hands together in front of him. Ashura Path, Chakra Cannon, he called as his hands morphed together and formed a large cannon-like device. Once the construct was ready, he began charging his chakra. "This is it, Nagato. I will not allow this meteor to strike," he roared as he took aim. "Fire!" he roared as a beam of pure chakra shot down towards the still immobile Rinnegan enslaved corpse. In Nagato's cave, the redhead chuckled to himself. "It's too late, Oracle," he said while panting. His hair had turned white and he was bleeding from his nose, mouth, ears, and eyes. "You will die, and, no, my pain," he croaked out. After speaking his final piece, he coughed up more blood, his eyes rolled back, and he lurched forward. Uzumaki Nagato was now dead. Dead from his own vengeful pain. Cole let out a long breath as he looked over his finished work. The area the Deva path was standing in was nothing more than a scorching crater. The orange-haired corpse was nowhere to be seen. And then it happened. Gravity returned to normal. And that meant one thing. A giant fucking meteor was coming down right on top of them. "Shit," he yelled as he spun in midair, watching as the meteor began its descent. His eyes hardened as he watched the meteor. "It may take the rest of my chakra, but I refuse to lose anyone else," he roared as he brought his arms back together. His arms became mechanical, wires and pipes connecting them. They spit into several different tubes and stretched into the air in front of him. "Ashura Path," he roared as he continued forming his weapon. A massive barrel stretched forth from his arms as a tube for back blast extended behind him. "Chakra," he continued until the weapon was complete. "Railgun," he roared as his chakra channeled into the cannon that was twice his size. It formed a massive ball of chakra in the front of the cannon until it was overflowing. And then it fired. A wide and fast beam of pure chakra. It rocketed towards the falling meteor. And once it struck, it didn't stop. It blasted straight through the falling landmass. As it passed through, the meteor glowed blue and began to slow. It stayed in the air for all more of a second until it exploded. Into a massive blue explosion that sent the meteor into small pieces, scattering across the lands. The vast wave forced all of Team Konoha to their stomachs as they were flattened by the destructive force of the attack. This only spelled something awful for Cole himself. He was high in the air when the blast hit. It sent him to the ground with little mercy for its creator. He crashed into the unforgiving earth, hard. Hard enough to form his own crater and break several bones. And he knew, he could feel and hear the bones snap on impact. Once the blast cleared, he lay there, broken and unmoving. But he couldn't help the smirk he had on his face. "Heh, didn't let anyone get squashed, did I?" he groaned from his immobile position. He lay there for a while before he could feel someone's presence. "Dad!" Naruto called out in worry. He stood over his father with worry in his eyes as he assessed his father's condition. Cole chuckled, much to his own pain. "Yeah, I ain't moving for a while." "What happened to Sasuke?" he asked the blonde. Naruto sighed as he plopped down next to his old man. "He got away, just before you broke loose. Hell, Toby showed up and whisked him away," he grumbled as he lay down. "Damn," Cole said in a bitter tone. "How did that little brat do it?" he mused to himself in a quiet tone. "How was it possible? There was just no way. Only he and Nagato had it." Naruto caught his father's words and decided to investigate. "What? Who did what?" Naruto asked with his eyes narrowed. Cole flicked his eyes to his son, still unable to move. "Well, Sasuke somehow has the Rinnegan," he said to the blonde from his immobile position. Naruto's face paled as he bolted up to look at him. What? Chapter 109, A Somber Return. Naruto caught his father's words and decided to investigate. "What? Who did what?" Naruto asked with his eyes narrowed. Cole flicked his eyes to his son, still unable to move. Well, Sasuke somehow has the Rinnegan, he said to the blonde from his immobile position. Naruto's face paled as he bolted up to look at him. What? Naruto stared at his father with eyes twice the size they normally were. What do you mean he has the Rinnegan? He roared out. It was then that the others of their group made themselves known. Sakura coughed into her hand to get the two males' attention. I was able to get Sarutobi-sama stabilized. How are you, Uzumaki-sama? She asked the down Rinnegan bearer. Cole chuckled slightly and winced in pain. Well, to put it bluntly, out of chakra and fucked up, he said with a weak smile, not able to fully turn his head towards the pinkette. Sakura nodded seriously and crouched next to him to check his condition. A frown set on her face as she checked him over. She sighed and shook her head. Well, I have good news and bad news. Which do you want first? She asked in a critical tone. Well, the bad news would be nice. I would like to know just how fucked up my body is at the moment, he said with a shaky chuckle, before he winced again. Sakura sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. Well, first off, you'll need to stop laughing like that and keep speaking to a minimum. You have 3 ribs that are cracked and 2 that are broken. Oh, and another 2 that are just shattered. Your left thigh is split down the middle and your collarbone is snapped. You also have a fracture in your 3rd lumbar. And to top it all off, your chakra system is fried, and from the strain your arms were put through, they will most likely be paralyzed for a while due to nerve damages and chakra burns. So, several weeks in the hospital and reconstructive surgery is guaranteed, she explained to the Rinnegan bearer. Cole huffed and winced again. He was going to have to learn to control his emotional breathing. So, royally fucked up would be a good description, he asked the pink-haired field medic. She nodded. Royally fucked up indeed, she agreed with the white-haired man. Cole nodded slightly and asked his next question. The good news? He asked the girl. Well, she started. None of your vital organs have been injured, and that everyone else is perfectly fine, save Guy-sensei, she said before the realization finally struck her. Oh, Kami-sama, what are we going to tell Lee? She murmured to herself and gripped her elbows. A silent sob passed over her, causing both Naruto and Cole to look away, afraid they would start to cry too. They stayed like that for a moment before Cole broke in again. Has Jiraiya woken up yet? I know my clone finished healing him before I destroyed the meteor, he said to the girl. Sakura wiped away her tears and shook her head. No, he's still unconscious. I don't know much about your healing method, but it doesn't seem to replenish chakra exhaustion, she clarified. Cole nodded, to the best of his ability, while Naruto let loose a relieved sigh. At least Erosenin made it out all right. And then a thought struck him. Dad, what about Gaara? And the rest of Suna? Naruto asked his father when the realization that the Jinchuriki of Sunagakure was still nowhere to be found. A sad look came to Cole's eyes as he looked to his son. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I think it's too late. If Sasuke was here, that means Tobi was here as well. Even if we beat all of the Akatsuki, Tobi would have already made off with Gaara and Nagato's body now that I think about it. And as for Suna, well, use Usage mode to find survivors. I don't think there would be that many after all that's happened. We are in the middle of where the village once stood, Cole said in a defeated tone. This mission was a failure. Even though we took down 4 of the Akatsuki, it wasn't worth the loss of a comrade and entire village. He mumbled to himself. We need to report to the village, Naruto, make a clone and have it flash us back. I want you to stay here and look for survivors, Cole said with an authority he didn't really feel at the moment. The first time he takes a full team of people out on a mission, this just go wrong in the worst of ways. Sakura put her hands over Cole's torso and a green glow formed around them as she started treating Cole's wounds. I'm going to get started on mending the bones and closing your open wounds. I don't have the resources or the chakra to fully start to heal you, but I can get you started for Tsunade-sama, she said as she concentrated on his injuries. "Thanks, Haruno-san," he said to her, letting his head rest onto the ground. A few minutes later, the rest of Team Konoha arrived next to Cole along with a Naruto clone. After Sakura confirmed Cole was ready for the trip, the clone shined them back to Konoha while the real Naruto began to gather natural chakra and search for any survivors. Kotetsu and Izumo were doing what they normally did. Lays around on gate duty. Kotetsu was enjoying a nice little nap while Izumo was blankly staring out into space. The two forever Chunins were not expecting for their day to get a lot more exciting and troublesome. Team Konoha flashed into existence right in front of the check-in desk and thoroughly scared the shit out of Izumo as he screamed like a little girl, causing Kotetsu to wake up and jump up too fast, smashing his head on the roof of the check-in station. An exhausted Hiruzen looked at the two before sighing in annoyance. "Chunin Izumo," he called. Izumo jumped to attention. "Yes, Sandame-sama," he saluted to the elderly man. "Call the hospital and have an emergency team here right now. We have injured with us. And inform Tsunade of our arrival while you're at it," he grumbled as he sat on the ground, waiting for the Chunin to do what he ordered. Izumo looked at the group and noticed that the legendary Jiraiya of the Sannin was unconscious. Kakashi of the Sharingan looked like he was run over by a cart and suffered an emotional thrashing, and the fearsome Uzumaki clan head, who had somehow domesticated Konoha's snake mistress, looked like he was going to keel over any minute. "Yes, Sandame-sama," he shouted before shining to the hospital. Sakura sighed as she finished Cole's first aid. "What happened to Kotetsu?" She walked over to the check-in station and looked inside. The member of the Forever Chunin duo was unconscious on the floor, a massive bump on the top of his head. "Man, the security in Konoha is just top-notch, huh?" Naruto sat in a meditative position as he let his senses reach out to the outskirts of Sunagakure, or at least, what was left of it. It was sickening, all of the death that was in those destroyed buildings and debris. He couldn't feel a single life for a long time. It was horrid. The fact someone could just kill off an entire hidden village like that made Naruto green and his stomach want to throw itself out of his throat. He fought down his sickly feeling to focus on trying to find any survivors. He let his senses roam for a few minutes before he finally found someone. And to his horror, it was the only person he could find. The life force was incredibly small, most likely a child. And it was also very weak. He needed to act fast. He looked off into the person's direction before cloaking himself with Kurama's churka so he could get there as fast as he could. He quickly dashed out of the crater that the battle took place in and rushed into the ring of debris and fallen buildings that circled it. He continued to run until he came across a fallen house that the person was in. Furrowing his eyebrows, he formed 3 chakra arms and began to gently remove the fallen rubble. After a few minutes he finally found her. Yes, her. It was a small girl, no older than 5. She had shoulder-length brown hair and was bleeding from her forehead where a good-sized gash cut her open. He deactivated his cloak and went over to the girl and brought her out of the ruined building. He looked her over and did his best to help her. He wasn't a field medic by a long shot, but he knew enough about first aid to at least bandage a wound and make sure she would be okay. He ripped off part of his cloak and used it as a makeshift bandage to bind the girl's cut. It wasn't until he tightened it in her head did she wake up. Her eyelids slowly opened up, revealing pale blue eyes. She gave Naruto a half-awake look before saying anything. "D-Daddy?" she asked in an incredibly weak voice. Naruto stiffened at her voice. He hadn't noticed she was awake until she spoke. He looked to her eyes with concern. "Hi there," he said in a soft tone. "Can you tell me your name, little one?" he asked the girl with a smile. "Izumi," she said weakly to the blonde before grabbing onto his arm. "Where's my daddy?" she asked in tears filling her eyes. Naruto closed his eyes and looked away before reaching down and picking up the girl. He held her tightly as she began to cry into his shoulder. No child should have to go through this. No one deserved this pain. He may have had someone take him in once he lost his family. But he didn't want anyone to feel that loneliness. His battle with Kurama showed his the dangers of hate, and especially of loneliness. so he held onto her before taking a deep breath. "Don't worry, Izumi-chan. I'll take care of you, and that's a promise." Chapter 110, Road to Recovery. "You damn well better start explaining what in the hell happened right now," Tsunade roared as she entered Cole's hospital room. She kicked the door in and caught a glimpse of the before thought to be near invincible Oracle. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw his condition. The doctor standing next to his bed smiled and rushed over to Tsunade along with his team of nurses. "Oh, Tsunade-sama. Thank Kami-sama you're here. We can finally start his surgery," the doctor called as he started to have Cole sedated and wheeled out of the room into the surgical room. Tsunade blanked at that. "Surgery," she howled as she followed after the group. "Just how bad is he?" she asked in a serious tone. The nurse next to the doctor handed Tsunade a clipboard with his information on it and she paled. "How is he even alive right now?" She breathed as she looked over his injuries. "If he's this bad," she started. "Where's the rest of his team? What's their conditions?" she asked the lead doctor as they entered the surgical room. The doctor let his team move Cole onto the operation table before he and Tsunade went to clean their hands and prep for the surgery. Well, Sandame-sama and Jiraiya-sama had cases of chakra exhaustion and minor poison damage to his left lung. Nothing too serious due to Haruno-san being on location. Haruno-san only has a case of exhaustion while Hataki-san has some minor injuries and similar chakra exhaustion to Sandame-sama. Namake-sama hasn't returned from the battlefield yet, still looking for survivors. But his clone was complaining about a sore leg, the doctor listed off as he put on his gloves and masked and had Tsunade follow him out to the operation room. Tsunade reached out and grabbed his shoulder. "Wait, what about Mato guy?" she asked the doctor. He looked down and sighed before turning away from his Hokage. Mato guy was Kia on location. Uzumaki-sama reported that there was no body to recover, he said before setting up next to Cole, who was laying on his stomach so that the doctors could begin operating on his back. Tsunade paled as she froze in the middle of the room. There was a casualty. Just what happened out there? It was 6 hours before Cole woke up in a different part of the hospital. He hated having surgery. He remembered back when he lived in his previous world having surgery on his shoulder from a football injury. He also remembered waking up violently, trying to leave the hospital. He just hoped he didn't try that again since he highly doubted 6 nurses would be enough to hold him down like last time. Luckily, he had woken up perfectly docile and with a slight headache. He blinked his ripple-patterned eyes a few times, shaking off the grogginess from the anesthetic. And then he looked down at his condition. Nearly his entire body was covered in bandages. His broken leg was in a cast and elevated. He had a strange plastic type of cast around his ribs and had thick bandages on his arms. He also noticed he couldn't move them at all. Yup, just like his shoulder surgery. Just this time it was both arms that were numb and unresponsive. He decided to have a quick look around the room and noticed Tsunade standing a few feet from his bed. "Oh, good, you're awake," she said in a sickly sweet tone, a smile on her face. Cole began to sweat bullets as he already knew he was in for a thrashing. And how right he was. Her features took a complete 180 as she howled at him. "Blowing up a fucking meteor. What in the fucking hell were you thinking?" she roared at him, causing him to shrink back into his bed. He chuckled nervously at her. "So you heard about that, huh?" he said to her in quiet tone. "You're damn right I did." "Cammy! Just what in the hell happened?" "Now my best shinobi is out of commission, one of our allies have been destroyed, and I've lost a valuable shinobi that cannot be easily replaced," she yelled, sitting in a chair next to him with a huff. She looked at him with a scowl. "Well, I'm waiting," she hissed. Cole sighed, not wincing since he was still on pain meds. "We failed. There is nothing else I can say. We arrived far too late. The entire village was won by the time we got there. When we did engage the enemy, their numbers were much larger than we thought they'd be. I'd say nearly 3,000 of them. The Akatsuki named Deidara used a self-destruction jutsu and took Guy with him. And from there, everything went to hell. Nagato used the Chibaku Tensei to form a meteor above us. It would have killed us all and leveled miles of land if I didn't stop it. But that isn't even the worst part. Towards the end of the battle, Uchiha Sasuke showed up with Tobi, showing off a new power the brat somehow acquired. Cole explained to the Hokage. She nodded and sighed. That matches the story Naruto gave us, but the Rinnegan, really? She asked the injured man. Cole nodded before rounding on Tsunade. Wait! Did you say Naruto? How many survivors did he find? Was he able to get them all to safety? Are they here? He asked in rapid fire. Tsunade shook her head and pinched the bridge of her nose. Well, she began. SHE is alright, and yes, SHE is here. With Naruto and Hinata back at their house, in fact. I tried to talk him out of it, but he said that no child should have to go through something that bad and not have a family there to help them. So he took her home with him. She sighed before looking at Cole's confused expression. He did what? Cole asked in shock. Tsunade nodded along with him. Yup, he basically adopted the sole survivor of Sunagakure. 5 hours earlier, Naruto was sitting with an unconscious Izumi sitting in his lap. The poor girl had finally passed out from emotional exhaustion after crying for half an hour, and Naruto was mulling over what he could do for the girl. He couldn't just leave her here for the cleanup crews to find. And he definitely could just take her back to Konoha and leave her all alone. He only saw one option left. What his father had done for him. I hope Hina-chan will be alright with this. He grumbled before he hurried back to Konoha. Once he flashed into the village, he made his way to the hospital and found that there was a horde of doctors and nurses running around like crazy. What's going on? He asked one of the passing doctors. She stopped and looked at him and then to the injured child in his arms. Namike-sama. Is this one of the survivors? She asked him, looking between him and the child. Naruto's expression hardened as he held the girl a little closer. Yeah, the only one, he said lowly as he adjusted her weight in his arms. The doctor, and all of the people who had gathered after hearing the doctor call out to Naruto, gasped. People started shouting and wanting answers to questions Naruto wasn't mentally ready to answer yet. All of the yelling was causing Izumi to stir in Naruto's arms. He gave the group a pointed look, making them all shut up. He then looked to the female doctor he was first talking to. I need you to check on her. She had a pretty nasty cut on her head before I did some first aid, he said to her. She nodded and turned to one of the empty rooms of the hospital. Come this way, I'll see what I can do. Hinata, followed by the rest of the Uzumaki family, burst into the hospital and instantly shot rapid-fire questions. Anko was angry that she heard her husband was injured, and Hinata was worried about Naruto's condition. A very scared doctor showed them the way to the waiting area for Cole, and the group saw Naruto crouched in front of a little girl who was sitting in one of the chairs along the hallway. The girl had a fresh bandage on her head, and a few on her arms and legs. She was crying and listening to what Naruto was saying. The blonde in question had a very tired and concerned look on his face. The group was getting close now, and Naruto had said something that made the girl's eyes widen before she jumped at him in a hug. She started crying into the crook of his neck, and Naruto just held her gently and let her cope with what had just happened to her. Akari asked as she walked up next to Naruto and tugged on his damaged cloak. He looked down to his sibling before looking to see Akira standing next to her and his mother and wife waiting behind them. Naruto smiled at them and rested his palm on top of Akari's head. Hey Squirt. Been a while, huh? He asked in a tired tone. Akari giggled under Naruto's hand, but Akira walked up and tugged on his sleeve. Papa? How is Papa? He asked in a worried tone. Naruto looked to him and his sister and back to his mother and wife. He sighed before looking back to Akira and Akari. Dad'll be just fine, little one. But he is hurt. He'll have to be here for a while. He fought off a lot of bad guys today, he said with a sad smile before it turned into a smirk. Get this. Dad blew up a meteor. It was awesome. He shot a big laser at it and blew it up. It was just as big as the Hokage monument too, he said with a sly smile. The twins looked at their older brother in awe. Really? They asked at the same time, eyes filled with stars. And then they looked to the now confused Izumi. Hey Unka, who's she? Akari pointed to the little girl, who was a year older than the twins. Izumi gave a quiet eep and clung to Naruto, trying to hide somehow. Naruto smiled and stood up and shifted Izumi's weight in his arms. Everyone, I would like you to meet the newest member of the family. This little tyke is Izumi. And I hope we can all be one big happy family. Chapter 111, Tying Up Loose Ends. The twins looked at their older brother in awe. Really? They asked at the same time, eyes filled with stars. And then they looked to the now confused Izumi. Hey Unka, who's she? Akari pointed to the little girl, who was a year older than the twins. Izumi gave a quiet eep and clung to Naruto, trying to hide somehow. Naruto smiled and stood up and shifted Izumi's weight in his arms. Everyone, I would like you to meet the newest member of the family. This little tyke is Izumi. And I hope we can all be one big happy family. In the vast valleys of Tsuchi no Kuni, two figures were watching over a wandering man. The man was giant, easily 6 feet 4 inches. He wore red-tiled armor with a large rice farmer's hat made of the same material. But the strangest thing about the man was that he carried a large furnace on his back, nearly the same size as the man himself. The two who were watching him stood on top of a large stone spire, hiding behind some of its mass. They both wore gray cloaks and white masks. One of the two, the taller one, wielded a massive broadsword, covered in bandages, while the smaller of the two sported a tanto on his left shoulder. They had been watching the wandering man for weeks, keeping tabs on him, and most importantly, keeping him safe. It's kinda strange, don't you think? The taller of the two said. The shorter one turned to him and tilted his head. How so? He asked in a deep monotone voice. The taller one shrugged and looked back to their charge. Well, he knows we've been watching him for the past month, and yet he doesn't seem to care. I mean, this guy has quite the track record for him to not know we're here. I guess the guy really doesn't like humanity like the rumors say, the tall man mused. The shorter one shook his head and returned to sitting in silence. They stayed that way until their charge made it far enough to move locations again. But before they settled in their new hiding spot, something happened. Their charge stopped his movements and took a defensive stance. And not 2 seconds later, the area he was in exploded into fire. Shit! Itachi, come on, it's game time, the tall man said as he brandished his broadsword. Itachi nodded and followed. Right behind you, Kisame, he said as the two made their way to defend the armored man. The man in red armor jumped out of the inferno with hardly a scratch on him, showing his skill and immunity to flame. So you two finally want to make your move, he grumbled as Itachi and Kisame landed next to him, prepared for a fight. Actually, Han-san, we were ordered to defend you by a third party who has your best interest at heart, Itachi said to the IWA shinobi. Han snorted and shook his head. I figured that. I was talking to the other two shitheads that have been following me for the past hour, he said as he glared at the two figures coming out of the flame. The first to clear the flame was a tall man with a muscular frame. He had long brown hair with 2 bangs that lined his face. He also had tan skin with red lips as well as gray eyes. The second man had wore a long black cloak with a hood that covered most of his head, save his right eye, showing the crimson of the Sharingan and a few locks of long black hair. Itachi stiffened when he saw the man. He reached up and removed his mask and looked at him. It's been a while, brother. Have you gotten any stronger since I last saw you? Itachi asked him. Sasuke sneered at his older brother. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, he said with venom in his voice. He turned his head to his partner and scowled. Raiga, you handle Kisame. Itachi is mine, he said in a low growl while unsheathing his katana. Raiga shrugged and pulled out 2 strange-looking blades. They were short swords with 2 sickle-like bladed on either sides. Fine, I always wanted to know which was better anyway, the Samahana or the Kiba, he said with a smirk before dashing towards Kisame. He didn't make it far though, as a large cloud of steam covered the area, blocking his view of his target. "What the fuck?" he said in confusion as he looked around, trying to find his way out. "Did you forget I was here as well?" A deep rumbling voice called out as Raiga took a heavy blow to his stomach, sending him skidding across the ground in pain. Raiga rolled to his feet and jumped back and out of the steam right as another fist connected with where he was, crushing the stone under the heavy strike. Raiga cursed and tried to channel lightning into his swords, but was interrupted when he was forced to duck and then jump away from a slashing combo from Kisame. The blue-skinned man turned to Itachi and smirked. "We'll handle this, reject swordsman. Why don't you go play with your brother for a little while," he said before turning back towards Raiga and charged him with Han by his side. Itachi nodded before drawing his tanto. "So little brother, why don't we see how far you have come?" he asked before disappearing in a blur of speed. Sasuke readied his blade and blocked the attack Itachi sent at him from behind without looking. "You'll have to do better than that, you bastard," he roared as he sent a back kick towards Itachi's face. The older Uchiha ducked underneath the kick and swiped at Sasuke's base leg, knocking him off his feet. Sasuke landed on his back but rolled backwards in time to dodge Itachi's thrust with his tanto. Sasuke returned to his feet and dashed forward, bringing his sword up and channeling lighting chakra through it. He brought the lightning-enhanced blade down on his brother and easily cut through his tanto. His blade continued to cut into Itachi's shoulder, but right as the blade made contact, the older Uchiha burst into a murder of crows, blocking Sasuke's view. Through the confusion the birds brought, Itachi smashed his fist into the side of Sasuke's head, sending him sliding across the ground. The younger Uchiha recovered quickly and jumped into the air. "Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu," he called before sending a massive ball of flame towards the elder Uchiha. Itachi dodged the flame with a well-timed shunshin and reappeared in a flock of crows. He ran through a set of hand signs while in mid-air behind his younger brother. "Katan, Hosenka no Jutsu," he called, sending a volley of smaller blasts of flame towards his brother's back. Sasuke spun around just in time for the first explosion to rock his location. Itachi sighed as he watched the flames cover his brother in a massive inferno. "I'm sorry, little brother, but it seems you still aren't strong enough," he started to say until the flames began to disappear. More importantly, they looked like they were being drawn in to where Sasuke was standing. Itachi's eyes widened as he watched his brother absorb the attack. He stood there with only some light burns that singed off his hood and parted of his sleeves. And now with Sasuke's head removed, Itachi could easily see the source of Sasuke's now power in the boy's left eye. The Rinnegan. He breathed in disbelief. How could he have gotten it? Sasuke began to chuckle. That chuckle grew louder and louder until it became a full-on laugh. Sasuke had a crazed look in his eyes as he looked at his brother. "Well, I guess you're wondering how I got this little bit of power, aren't you, bro?" he cackled before removing his cloak. He wore black ninja pants and black sandals, but nothing covered his chest. And on his chest was something horrifying. It was a face. A gray face covered his chest right over his heart. "Madara so graciously saved me with this after you stabbed me those few months ago. You see, I unlocked the Rinnegan after receiving cells from the Shodiame Hokage, Senju Hashirama. It also seems that if you combine Uchiha cells with Senju, you seem to gain the Rinnegan. Now, it isn't perfect yet. I still need to train in using it before I could take on that fucking Uzumaki and his eyes. But you? I think I have enough knowledge to get you however I want," he cackled before lunging towards his brother. Itachi scowled as he engaged his brother. After a brief encounter, Sasuke jumped back and raised a hand. "Shinra Tensei," he called and launched Itachi back. The older Uchiha recovered however, and landed on his feet ready to continue. "You really aren't as strong as Seinaru-san. And you also seem to be forgetting something," he said before standing straight. Sasuke growled at his brother. "And what's that?" he hissed. Itachi smirked at his brother before a orange fire-like glow covered his body. The power that the Sharingan holds. Susanoo. Chapter 112, The Last Uchiha. Itachi scowled as he engaged his brother. After a brief encounter, Sasuke jumped back and raised a hand. Shinra Tensei, he called and launched Itachi back. The older Uchiha recovered however, and landed on his feet ready to continue. You really aren't as strong as Seinaru-san. And you also just seem to be forgetting something, he said before standing straight. Sasuke growled at his brother. And what's that? He hissed. Itachi smirked at his brother before a orange fire-like glow covered his body. The power that the Sharingan holds. Susanoo. Kisame brought the Samahata down towards Ryaga and crushed the earth as the Kiba wielder dodged. Raiga charged his blades with lightning and thrust them towards the blue-skinned man. Lightning arched off his blade and straight towards the former Akatsuki member, only for it to be absorbed by Kisame's Samahata. Raiga cursed before he was forced to dodge a powerful burst of steam. The Kiba wielder rolled to a ready stance as he faced off against the Gobi Jinchuriki, and the man feigned as the tailless-tailed beast. He growled in annoyance as he was forced to continue his retreat as Kisame pressed his attack. Damn it, he hissed as he took another blow from Han. He went sliding across the ground until he rolled to a stop. Gingerly touching his now heavily bruised ribs, he scowled at the two of them, weighing his options. Kisame scoffed at him and turned his back to his opponent. Damn Raiga, were you always this weak? Oh wait, don't answer that. You were, he laughed as he began to walk away from the fight. Han looked at him with a confused expression. Where are you going? He asked the blue-skinned man in an annoyed tone. Kisame turned back to the large Jinchuriki and shrugged. This fight isn't any fun. You could take him easily, so I'm gonna go see if Itachi need any help, he said with a lazy yawn and continued to walk from the two combatants. Han's sweat dropped as he watched the man leave. He comes to save me, and then leaves me to fight the guy? Stupid human. He grumbled before turning back on Ryaga. Susanoo. Itachi roared as a orange flame-like shroud of chakra enveloped his body. Slowly, rib-like constructs form around his body and begin to grow arms. The arms grow until a skull forms. Over the skull, flesh, tendons, and skin cover the bones. Soon, a cowl-like armor covers the skin and a shield forms in the left hand of the chakra construct and a blade in the right. Sasuke unconsciously backed away from his brother in fear. Well, what the hell, he cried as the Susanoo finished forming. Itachi looked at his brother and sighed. This little brother is what will defeat you, he said in a calm voice. After hearing that, Sasuke snarled at his brother. Like hell it will, he roared and started running no hand signs before slamming his hands on the ground. Kuchios no Jutsu, he called as he became covered in smoke. A few seconds pass until a massive albino tiger bursts out from the smoke and charges towards the Susanoo. As the tiger attacks, a hawk carries Sasuke into the air and out of Itachi's range. The tiger roars as it reaches Itachi and swipes its massive paw down onto the chakra construct. Itachi just brings up his shield and blocks the blow before using the shield to bash the tiger away from him. Please, you'll need to do better than this to win, little brother, he said calmly as sweat started to pour down his forehead. He brought up the sword and pierced the tiger's hide, causing it to dispel in a plume of smoke. Sasuke cursed as he rode on his hawk. He started raining fire jutsu down on his brother's location. Itachi brought up his shield again to defend from the rain of fire jutsu. As he held up his shield, he watched his brother fly over him and took a deep breath. Amaterasu, he called as his left eye began to bleed. Sasuke watched in confusion as his brother's eye bleed for no reason, until his hawk caught fire on one of its wings. It was a roaring black flame that made the hawk cry out and dispel while in midair. Shit! Sasuke cursed as he began to fall from the sky. He began to form hand signs as he raced towards the ground. Futon, de Tapa, he called before he hit the ground and released a strong wind that slowed his fall. Once he did land, he rolled into the landing and came up on his feet, just before Itachi could swing his sword onto him. Sasuke dashed to the side to dodge the massive blade and thrust out his palm. "Bancho Tennin," he called, trying to pull Itachi to him. The elder Uchiha instantly felt his body being pulled from his Susanoo and flew through the air and out of the construct, causing it to deform and fall apart. Sasuke brought up his blade and stabbed it towards his brother, but before it could hit home, the Samahata blocked his path. Itachi slid across the ground past his brother while Kisame held up Sasuke. "Heh, you call that a sword?" he said to the younger Uchiha with a mocking tone before he brought up his foot and kicked Sasuke away from him. Sasuke flew through the air and landed on his feet, ready to continue fighting. Itachi, however, shakily stood back up as he coughed up blood. Kisame looked at his partner and cursed. "He's used too much of the Sharingan at once. I need to finish this quickly," he thought as he brought up his blade to charge forward. But before he could, Itachi placed a hand on his shoulder and stopped him. "Kisame, this is my fight," he said between breaths as he charged past his partner. Kisame cursed and shook his head. "Fine, but if this gets too out of hand, I'm ending it." Itachi stood before Sasuke with his tanto drawn and breathing heavily. Sasuke smirked at his brother and leveled his blade towards him. "Oh, come on! Is this all you have? You summon up a monster and then a black flame and you're done? You're pathetic," he roared as he charged forward, lighting coating his sword. He brought down the blade, only for it to be stopped by a chakra-constructed rib. Itachi coughed, but held his ground before lunging at his brother. His blade was deflected as Sasuke brought up his own, and then made a stabbing motion towards the elder Uchiha. Once again a rib of the Susanoo blocked the strike, but this time it had cracked from the blow. Itachi cursed before bringing a kunai into his offhand and swinging it at his brother. Sasuke caught his weakened brother's wrist with his left and brought down his blade yet again. Itachi dropped his tanto to grab Sasuke's wrist, leaving the brothers in a deadly lock. They pushed and struggled against each other for a moment, testing their strength. Until Sasuke's smirk and power flowed through his body. "Chidori Stream," he called as his body sparked to life with a veil of lighting over his skin, shocking Itachi and sending him sliding across the ground. Kisame cursed as he watched Itachi fall and jumped in to try and save him, but Sasuke sent him flying with an overcharged Shinra Tensei. This gave Sasuke enough time to finally bring his blade down on his brother's defenseless form, piercing his chest with his lighting-coated blade. Itachi cried out in pain, but grabbed onto Sasuke's arm, causing his younger brother to look him in the eye. "Tsukuyami," he roared as his eyes turned into the Mangekyo Sharingan. Sasuke froze for a second before he cried out in agony and slumped back away from his brother. Itachi panted in exhaustion and pain. But he had something he needed to do. Something he needed to finish. He looked at his brother's writhing form and uttered one last word. "Amaterasu," he said as black flame covered his brother. The roaring black flames covered his brother, and Itachi knew he had failed in his mission to turn Sasuke to the light. And so he closed his eyes, falling into the darkness, the thought of him failing his brother following him into the abyss. Han looked over in time to see Itachi cover Sasuke with flame. Han sighed as his grip on Raiga's head tightened until he heard the satisfying crunch of the man's skull in his hand. He turned around, but then felt something off, making him look back. He looked and noticed the boy who had caught flame, standing as if nothing had happened to him, laughing out at the fallen man. "You fool," the boy cackled as he extracted his blade from the corpse. "You failed, brother. Your Sharingan was no match for my Rinnegan. Now, to finish the other two," he grumbled and turned to Kisame. The blue-skinned man growled in anger and hefted Samahata onto his shoulder. "Fine kid, if you want to follow after Itachi so badly, I'll happily send you to him in hell," he roared as he charged at Sasuke. Han sighed and shook his head at the fighting. "Humans, all they want is war and to kill each other. I'm done with this," he said as he turned and left the battlefield. He didn't make it far, however, when a vortex opened up before him and a single man appeared. The man wore a purple outfit and a mask with 3 tomoi engraved in it like eye holes. "Oh, where do you think you're going, Gobi?" he asked in a menacing voice, hefting a battle fan onto his shoulder. Han cursed as he retook his stance. You humans just keep popping up today. No matter, I'll kill you like I did the other fool, he said before he used a steam-enhanced jump to close the distance. But he was surprised to see that his fist just went right through the man, as if he was punching air. The man brought up his hand and sank it into his stomach, gripping something that made Han cry out in pain. You lose, Gobi, was the last thing he heard before everything went black. Sasuke tried his best to fend off the enraged shark-like man before him. But in all honesty, after his battle with Itachi, he was spent and was being throttled by Kisame. The blue-skinned man in question had fused with his blade, making him even more shark-like in feature. He brought up his web fist and crashed it into Sasuke's stomach, sending him flying. Sasuke soared through the air until he was caught by his master. Come Sasuke, we have what we want. It's time to leave, he instructed his pupil before enveloping them in a vortex. Sasuke bowed his head slightly to the man. Yes, Madara-sama, he said before they disappeared. Kisame roared in anger as he separated from his blade. With another roar he brought his hand down onto the ground and cratered the earth under him. Data Amamighty It. Chapter 113, New Family. Come Sasuke, we have what we want. It's time to leave, he instructed his pupil before enveloping them in a vortex. Sasuke bowed his head slightly to the man. Yes, Madara-sama, he said before they disappeared. Kisame roared in anger as he separated from his blade. With another roar he brought his hand down onto the ground and cratered the earth under him. Data Amamighty It. Alright, here we are, Izumi-chan. Hinata said as she walked next to Naruto while her husband carried the 4-year-old in his arms. Hinata had taken the news about Naruto adopting Izumi without asking her rather well. At first she was shocked, but then when she heard that Izumi lost her entire family, coupled with the girl's sheer adorableness, she couldn't say no to her. So they decided, after they were done with the visit to the doctors and Naruto filled Tsunade in on the mission, they'd show her her new home. And apparently, they didn't disappoint the little girl as her eyes widened and she gaped like a fish at the house. The Namikaze household was 3 stories tall and 2,500 square feet. She looked between the house and Hinata, waiting for the punchline of the joke. But when nothing else was said, she went back to staring at the house. Really? Why you live here? She gasped in shock. Naruto chuckled before adjusting her weight in his arms. No, he said to the girl, getting her to look at him with a funny expression. He poked her in the forehead, getting cute pout out of her, and chuckled. We live here, he said to the girl with a warm smile before he turned to the front gate and opened it. Now come on. I think you'll like the inside better than the outside of the house, he said to the girl. He and his wife walked the little girl to the front door and let her open it. The door silently opened and she took a few steps inside and looked with wide eyes at the house. She had only just walked in and could already feel the warmth the place was filling her with. She looked at everything and could only think of one thing. Home. She turned to Hinata and Naruto before tears started coming to her eyes. She sniffed once before running and jumping up into their arms crying. Thank you, she cried as the two smiled and held her. She buried her head in Naruto's neck and sobbed out thank yous. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she said before turning to Hinata. Thank you, Mama, she said, earning a hard blush from Hinata before turning to Naruto. Papa, she said one last time before both of the new parents looked at each other. And not being able to hold it back anymore, they crushed her in a hug. Hinata squealed lightly as she squeezed Izumi. Oh! Izumi-chan. Don't worry, Izumi-chan. We'll be with you forever and ever, she squealed happily, her lifelong dream of being a mother completed. Naruto held onto her and his wife and smiled. I promised you, Izumi-chan. I promised to take care of you, and I never go back on my promises, he said before they both let go of the girl, noticing she was starting to turn blue. They looked at her with nothing but love in their eyes and smiled. Welcome to the Namikaze family, Izumi-chan. The next few days were filled with many smiles, and even more tears. Guy's funeral was held along with a ceremony to mourn the loss of Tsunagakure. Lee, Niji, and Tintin were all grief-stricken by the sudden death of their sensei. Even if he had his faults, they looked up to him as a father, a friend, a crazy uncle you just could help but love. With the loss of his role model, Lee mellowed out a bit, but his fire's youth were still there as he dove into his training more intently than ever. Following his role, Tintin and Niji joined their friend and even tried to follow in his insane training regimen. Cole was isolated to the hospital to recover, and Hiruzen was decommissioned completely from the damage to his lungs. Jiraiya bounced back onto his feet quickly and went back to his research, sometimes popping in on Cole or the now larger Namake's family. Akari and Akira, along with Anko, took daily visits to the hospital to visit their father and cheer him up. He always got a kick out the kids coming in and drawing on his casts. Speaking of kids, he especially liked it when Naruto brought Izumi to meet her grandfather. Cole was lying on his bed, looking out the window to his left when he heard the door slide open. He turned his head over to see his eldest son carrying a small brown-haired girl with pale blue eyes wearing a lavender dress and purple shoes. Cole smiled warmly at the girl. "Well, well, well. Looks like I really am a grandpa now," he said as the two entered the room. Naruto smiled at him and let Izumi down. "Hey Dad. How you feeling?" he asked his father. Cole made a shrugging motion with his face and neck, still not able to move his arms. "I'll be better once I can move my arms and use the Naraka path to heal myself, but for now, I'm fine," he said before smiling at the little girl trying to hide behind Naruto's leg. Naruto chuckled at the little girl before pushing her in front of him. "Don't be afraid, Izumi-chan. Go say hi to Grandpa Seinaru," he said to the little girl. Sei shyly walked forward, keeping her gaze to the floor, only stealing glances at the Rinnegan bearer. Cole chuckled at the girl for a second. "No need to be shy, little one," he said to her. "Tell me, have you met Akari and Akira yet?" he asked the girl. She nodded shyly and smiled. "Well, I'm their papa. My name's Uzumaki Seinaru. What's yours?" he asked her, trying to get some words out of the shy girl. She twiddled her fingers for a second before looking up at him. I am Namake's Izumi," she replied with a blush. Cole smiled and nodded to her. "Well, Namake's Izumi, welcome to the family," he said to the girl, which caused her to smile broadly. "Thank you, Seinaruji-san," she chirped as he face-faulted from the honorific. Apparently Naruto found it hilarious that she had called his father Aji-san and bellowed out in laughter. Cole gave him a dry stare and narrowed his eyes. "You know," he said dangerously, "I can still use some of my attacks without my arms," he warned as Naruto paled before he was sent into the wall by an invisible force. Naruto slid down the wall in a boneless heap, causing Izumi to rush over to her new papa, checking if he was okay. 5 days and 3 operations later, Cole had his arms back in top shape and used the Naraka path to heal himself the rest of the way. He walked out of the King of Hell's mouth with a satisfied smirk. "Man, it pays to be awesome," he said to himself with a cheeky grin as Akira and Akari jumped into his arms and Anko walked over and kissed him. "Welcome back, lover boy," she said to him with a smirk. Cole smiled at his wife and children, giving each of them a kiss on the forehead. "It's go to be back," he sighed. "Well, that's good and all, but I'll need to borrow you again for about a week," Tsunade said as she walked over to Cole and his family. He raised an eyebrow and was about to start complaining when Tsunade held up a hand to stop him. "There is going to be a Gakage summit soon, well, more like Yonkage, but whatever. We're going to meet over the Akatsuki show and I want you, Naruto, and Jiraiya with me," she said to him. He sighed and shook his head. "Fine, when do we leave?" he asked in a defeated tone. Tsunade turned to leave before giving her answer. 4 days, she said and walked off. Chapter 114, Meeting of World Powers. He sighed and shook his head. "Fine, when do we leave?" he asked in a defeated tone. Tsunade turned to leave before giving her answer. 4 days, she said and walked off. "Geez, Heim. It's so damn cold." Jiraiya whined for about the 100th time. "I swear. I hate coming to his country," he continued to whine, causing a tick mark to form on his comrades' foreheads. Tsunade looked back at her fellow Sannin and scowled. "Jiraiya, I swear if you don't shut up I'm gonna hit you." She growled at the man, causing him to pale and back away from her. Normally, from anyone else he'd tell them to try it and see what it got them, but with Tsunade, one hit could kill. He nodded furiously. "Right, boss," he said with a salute, causing Naruto to snicker and Tsunade to sigh and continue walking. It had been 3 days since they left Konoha, and another 2 since they entered Tetsu no Kuni. During that time, they traveled about halfway to the summit location before they were forced to stop and wait out a blizzard. Now, it was nearing evening and they were about 6 miles from the summit, so they decided to stroll the rest of the way and rest up and come up with what to say. The sun was setting when they decided to put up camp and get to the summit in the morning. But as they were setting up camp, a voice caused them to stop. Well. Fancy seeing you here, Hokage Dano." A very tall man with chocolate-colored skin and blonde cornrows said as he walked into their clearing, followed by a similar man with sunglasses, a blonde woman, and another blonde man. Tsunade frowned slightly before greeting the man. "Reikage Dano. A pleasure to see you again. Tell me, were you planning to use this clearing as well?" she asked. The Reikage of Kumogakur smirked at her and shrugged. "Yeah, kinda was." "Mind if we share?" he asked with his smirk still in effect. Tsunade repressed a sigh and nodded. "I don't see why not. We are about to go to a meeting tomorrow, so why not some relaxation beforehand?" she said as she sat down next to the fire Cole had somehow made while they were talking. The Reikage looked at her group and high eyes widened. It seems introductions are in order for the others," he said before he turned to his group and nodded his head towards the Konoha team. The pale-skinned man walked up first and gave a small bow. "INC, it is a pleasure to meet you all," he said before his sensor abilities caught a hint of the size of Cole and Naruto's chakra, causing his head to whip to them and his face to pale. "They have even more chakra than Bisama," he thought in horror. The other man, instead of introducing himself, merely walked over to Cole and Naruto and bumped fists with them. Naruto smiled and bumped the man's fist. "Sup, Octopops? How've you been?" he asked as Cole bumped fists with the man. B gave them a large smile. "I'm doing fine, Mr. 9. How about you? How do you do?" he asked with a slight sway in his arms as he rocked to the beat he was giving himself. Cole and Naruto chuckled as they started having small talk with the Hachibi container, causing everyone else to raise their eyebrows, save for the last member of Ice Party. She took a deep breath before grabbing onto B's ear and giving it a nice little twist. "B! Quit you idiotic rapping and introduce yourself," she yelled into his ear, causing him to fall over in pain. He held his ear as he stood up and gave a slight bow to the rest of the group. "Name's Kiria B," he grumbled out as the woman shook her head at him. She looked back to the rest of Team Konoha and bowed. "I am Niyujito. It is a pleasure to meet you all. And is good to see you again, Naruto-san, Seinaru-san," she said to the father and son. Cole gave her a smirk and nodded his head to her. "I see that you're still keeping me in line," he said with a bit of amusement in his voice. INC, along with the rest of Team Konoha, were looking at them like they all had grown a second head before I shook his head and narrowed his eyes at them. "I expect an explanation about how you all know each other," he growled out at the four. Cole stiffened a bit before giving the Reikage a bow. "Sorry, Reikage-sama. I am Uzumaki Seinaru, head of the Uzumaki clan, and this is my son," he said as he raised his hand towards Naruto, who bowed. "Namake's Naruto, head of the Namake's clan," the blonde introduced himself before standing at attention. Ice's eyes widened as he looked at the two. "So, you're the light of Konoha I've heard so much about, and you must be the infamous Oracle. The rumors are true, Konoha really does have a Rinnegan bearer in their ranks," he grumbled as he looked at the two. Naruto shrugged it off and turned back to Yujito. He smiled at her and held out a hand. "How have you been, Yujito-san? Be here keeping you crazy?" he joked to his fellow blonde, making her sigh as she shook his hand. Same old, anything new with you? She asked in a kind tone with a smile. Naruto shrugged. Got married, fought at Suna, adopted a daughter, nothing really, he said as he scratched the side of his cheek. Both B and Yujito looked at their fellow blonde with gobsmacked expressions. Married, they both yelled and jumped in front of him, shaking him by his shoulders. Who? 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 They cheered for their fellow Jinchuriki, making INC to look at Yujito like she had lost her mind for acting so out of character. Naruto chuckled as they shook him and held out a picture he had taken a few days ago. This right here is my Hinata, he said as he pointed to Hinata in the image. She was holding a little brown-haired girl with a scar on her forehead. At that little ball of sunshine is Izumi-chan. We adopted her about a week ago since, well, Suna was destroyed, he said as he sobered at the thought and looked down slightly. As the three Jinchuriki got antiquated, the rest of the group decided to mingle around the fire where it was warm. I looked at Cole with a questioning glare. So, he started. Where did you meet my idiot brother? He asked the Rinnegan bearer. Cole chuckled and waved him off. Around the time I took Naruto to that little moving island of yours to train, he said with a grin, making I bristle and stammer over his words. What? He finally got out as he looked at him like he grew a second head. Cole laughed at him and shook his head. You know I am called the Oracle for a reason. I know a great many things, especially when it concerns things about Naruto's future over there. So, my question is, why bring 2 and 8 here if there is currently a huge threat hiding around as we speak? He asked the Raikage with an eyebrow raised. I smirked and shook his head. They are safest with me. If they are with me, then I doubt our enemies will attack us when there are the other Kage and their attendants with us, he said with confidence. Tsunade and Jiraiya looked to Cole for his reaction and saw his frown. I wouldn't be so sure, he said lowly. The leader of their group, the false Madara, he is now strong enough to face several Kage at the same time. And if he brings Sasuke with him, it would most likely take all of the Kage together to defeat them, he said as he laced his hands in front of his mouth. But there is one other piece we keep forgetting about, he said and looked to Jiraiya. Any word on Orochimaru? He asked the Sannin, causing Jiraiya to pale. You don't think he'll side with them, do you? He asked the Oracle. Cole shrugged his shoulders as the two Kages, C, and I frowned. Anything to get a crack at Sasuke's body. I mean, he's basically out of options since Tobi took him. So, what if Tobi came to Orochimaru with an offer for Sasuke's body? Or just a pair of Sharingan altogether, he said in a speculative tone. The 4 others thought as he hit them with those questions. It was very possible that they could convince Orochimaru to side with them. I shook his head and stood to go get B. We'll go over this more at the meeting with the other Kage. I'll be taking my idiot brother over there for an explanation on why he didn't tell me about you two trespassing, he growled as he marched over towards the now cowering Karai B. That night, B's screams could be heard from miles around. Chapter 115, Yonkage Summit. The 4 others thought as he hit them with those questions. It was very possible that they could convince Orochimaru to side with them. I shook his head and stood to go get B. We'll go over this more at the meeting with the other Kage. I'll be taking my idiot brother over there for an explanation on why he didn't tell me about you two trespassing, he growled as he marched over towards the now cowering Karai B. That night, B's screams could be heard from miles around. The next morning found Team Konoha breaking down camp with the Kumo group as they prepared for the meeting. Naruto, B, and Yujito were walking as a small group and having a bit of small talk as the 2 groups made it to the meeting point. Once they got to the building, 2 armored samurai stopped them from entering. The first one walked up and held up his hand to halt the group, his other hand on his sword. Stop! Names and purpose for being here, he ordered the group. Tsunade and I both stepped forward. Senju Tsunade, Godame Hokage of Konohagakure. I am here for the summit, she said in an authoritative voice. I crossed his arms and looked down at the 2 samurai. I, Yondaime Raikage of Kumogakure. I'm here for the same thing, he added in with a grumble, not liking being told what to do by someone below his station. The two samurai quickly took their hands off their blades and bowed. It's an honor to have you here, Hokage-sama, Reikage-sama. The Tsuchikage and Mizukage are already inside. Allow me to lead you to the meeting room, the first samurai told the group as he turned to his partner and nodded to him. The second samurai nodded back and opened the doors to the building. As the two groups walked inside, they couldn't help but notice the hundreds of samurai lining the pathway, hands on their weapons and ready to draw at a moment's notice. The lead samurai noticed the group's tension and turned his head to them. Don't worry about them. It's just with the Suna incident, security on the max for the meeting, he said to the group, hoping it'd lower the tension. It didn't. Save for one man in the group wearing a strange mask. He just walked as if he was bored. The samurai mentally shrugged and chalked it up to some strange ninja thing and leave the group on. Once they made it to the meeting room, a pair of samurai opened the door for them to enter as their guide introduced them. Senju Tsunade, Godame Hokage of Konohagakure, and I, Yondame Reikage of Kumogakure, he introduced to the groups inside as Team Konoha and Team Kumo entered the meeting room. The room was rather large with a horseshoe-like table that had a single desk at the end. The ones sitting at this table were a young woman and an elderly man. The man was of short stature and had a red and bulbous nose. His white hair was tied up into a top knot and had a mustache-beard combo and had a permanent scowl on his face. He was the Sandame Tsuchikage of Iwagakure, Ryotenbin no Inoki. The woman had long burnt orange hair and red lipstick. She wore a rather revealing blue kimono that did little to hide her assets. She was also looking in shock at Cole. She was the Godame Mizukage of Kirigakure, Terumi Mei. At the desk was an older man with long gray hair and a squared-off beard. He wore a white head wrap and gray samurai armor. His sword sitting next to his desk, just within reach. He was the shogun of the samurai, Mifune. Mei instantly stood up and pointed at Cole with her eyes wide in shock. "What are you doing here?" she yelled in shock/awe of the man who freed her nation from the worst tyrant to rule Kirigakure. Cole took a deep breath and sighed. "I knew this would happen," he grumbled as he shook his head. The rest of the groups were looking between Cole and Mei with a questioning look. Tsunade stepped forward with a hand on her hip. "Do you have a problem with one of my shinobi Mizukage Dano?" she asked Mei with a glare. Mei shook her head quickly, but kept looking at Cole. "No, Hokage Dano. I was just wondering why you have Yagura's killer and the savior of Mizu no Kuni in your group is all," she said in a false sweet tone. The others, save Naruto, all looked at Cole with shock as the man in question sighed and face palmed over his mask. "Can we please get to the meeting and answer those questions later?" he said to everyone, gaining a nod from Mifune. "I believe the young man has a point," he said and motioned for Tsunade and I to take a seat. They took their seats, giving Cole one last look before he and the rest of Team Konoha went to their own table in the end of the room. At this point they noticed the groups Mei and Inoki brought. In Mei's group was Chijiro and Ao. Both of them were looking at Cole with a mixture of awe and fear. In Inoki's group was his grandchildren, Akatsuchi and Kuratsuchi, as well as a red-haired man that had a somewhat jovial aura. He was Rashi, the host of the Yonbi, Son Goku. He, Naruto, Bee, and Yujito all gave each other a nod of greeting before they sat down. Now with everyone seated, Mifune stood and looked to each of the Kage. "Now that everyone is here, shall we begin?" he said, getting a nod from the Kage and retaking his seat. Inoki was the first to speak up out of the four. "So, am I the only one to notice the world seems to be down one hidden village? I'd like to know how the hell that happened when we've been at peace for nearly a decade," he asked with a questioning glare sent to Tsunade. She sighed and looked back to Cole and Naruto. "Would you two like to fill everyone in on what happened?" she said to the two, getting them to nod and come up to the table to present their case. Mifune looked at the two and gestured for them to introduce themselves. Naruto was the first to speak up. He bowed to the group and closed his eyes. "I am Namikaze Naruto, Jonin of Konohagakure and Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Kitsune," he introduced himself, gaining a gasp from the groups of people present. Inoki glowered at the boy, hardly keeping himself from vaporizing him from where he stood. Cole chuckled at everyone's reaction and placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. I am Naruto's adoptive father, Uzumaki Seinaru, Jonin of Konohagakure. Or, better known to all of you as the Oracle, he said before taking off his mask and earning a gasp of shock from Mei, Mifune, and Inoki. Mifune and Inoki due to the fact he had the Rinnegan. And Mei because she was finally able to see him without his mask. The Rinnegan! Inoki cried as he leaned forward to get a better look at the legendary eyes. Tsunade sighed at the Kage and Shogun and looked to Cole to get to the point. Cole nervously chuckled and nodded to his Hokage. Well, we first heard of Suna's danger when one of my spies noted the criminal organization known as Akatsuki's movement in the area, he said, earning a shocked look from Inoki. It was the Akatsuki, he asked incredulously and shook his head. I'll never be doing business with them again. He growled in rage as he pounded his fist on his end of the table. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the older man. You won't be able to anyway. They're all dead, he said, gaining a glare for Inoki. Cole cleared his throat and continued. Myself, Naruto, Jiraiya, Hatake Kakashi, and Mato Gai, and Sarutobi Hiruzen all rushed off to assist Suna to the best of our ability. But, once we arrived, Sunagakure was already destroyed, he said with a deep sigh. And the ones who did it? Mei asked in curiosity. Naruto picked up for his father. Their names were Sasori, Deidara, Konan, and Uzumaki Nagato, he informed everyone there. Inoki's glare intensified at the mention of Deidara's name. How could 4 people destroy an entire country? Mei asked in pure shock. Cole continued for his son. Nagato, a distant and lost relative to both myself and my son, held the very same eyes as I do. He used the power of the Rinnegan to completely destroy to the village before they could even counter his power, he told the group before getting to the point. Once we arrived, that's when the fighting started. Chapter 116, Alliance. And the ones who did it? Mei asked in curiosity. Naruto picked up for his father. Their names were Sasori, Deidara, Konan, and Uzumaki Nagato, he informed everyone there. Inoki's glare intensified at the mention of Deidara's name. How could 4 people destroy an entire country? Mei asked in pure shock. Cole continued for his son. Nagato, a distant and lost relative to both myself and my son, held the very same eyes as I do. He used the power of the Rinnegan to completely destroy to the village before they could even counter his power, he told the group before getting to the point. Once we arrived, that's when the fighting started. All of the remaining Kage sat at the horseshoe-like table with their hands rubbing their temples. Mifune looked incredulously at Cole as he recounted the events of the Sunagakure incident, not able to believe that a single man could destroy an entire village and then have the strength left to make a meteorite large enough to level enough land that Konoha and parts of IWA could be affected. So, let me get this straight. This, Nagato, character created a massive meteor. Sent it straight towards you and your team, and you just blew it up? Inoki said as he nursed his growing headache. Cole looked to the elderly particle style user and nodded. Essentially, he responded with a bored look on his face. He and Naruto had been retelling the event for 2 hours now, answering questions and explaining how they did things. And so far, the one part they were stuck on was the asteroid. Of course they could believe the fact that a literal army of plant men sprung from the ground to fight them, but when you put a giant fucking rock in the air and drop it, people seem to lose their minds. How? I said as he looked at Cole with a twitching left eye. Cole shrugged and held out his arm for the Kage to observe. I used the Ashura path of the Rinnegan, he said as his arm turned from flesh into machine, peeling back and disconnecting to form an energy cannon-like arm. Like this, he said to the gobsmacked observers. Well, what else can you do? Mei asked, enthralled by Cole's abilities. Cole turned his arm back to normal and waved a finger at her. Sorry, can't go giving away my techniques to people who aren't my allies. Hell, even Tsunade doesn't know what all I can do, he said with a shrug as he leaned against the table with his arms crossed. His I don't care attitude turned serious as he looked between the members of the Yongik Summit. But I can assure you, our enemies have the same abilities as I, and they are building an army to take us on with, he warned as the room's temperature dropped considerably. Mei looked between the other Kage. Ai and Inoki seemed to be in deep thought as Tsunade was biting her lip, probably sending a silent prayer that they agree to an alliance. The Mizukage shot up to her feet and gave them a confident smile. I agree to the alliance. We have already lost the Sanbai, and the Rokubi is MIA. Kirigakure does not wish to see this enemy have all the cards in their hands. We, the shinobi of Mizu no Kuni, will join with Kanahadakure no Sato for an alliance, she proclaimed, her confidence never wavering. Cole gave her a smirk and nodded his head. Soon after she proclaimed her allegiance, I groaned loudly as he reluctantly stood from his chair. Yeah. This'll probably find a way to bite me, but Kumozin, he said with a slight pout, that seemed to be more of a scowl. All eyes then turned to Inoki as he sat with an angry scowl. On one hand, I absolutely hate the notion of IWA having anything to do with you damn tree hugers. As well as the fact you still have a damn Namikaze with you, he grumbled as he slowly stood on top of his chair so that the height difference between himself and the other Kage wasn't so noticeable. But on the other, I'd have to be a fool not to join. IWA doesn't really care what our Jinchuriki do, but I know it's better to have them safe and with us than with some Madara wannabe. Iwazin, even though I'm already beginning to regret it, he grumbled and crossed his arms over his chest. Mifune looked between all of the Kage and smiled. As the witness for these proclamations, I now say the world has its first great shinobi alliance. But, why don't I sweeten this deal, he started to say as a smirk came to his face. The samurai will join this alliance as well, he proclaimed, much to the shock of the Kage and gathered shinobi. Cole merely chuckled at the older man's claim, knowing that having Mifune in the group would be a powerful boon. Anyone who could fight one-on-one with Hanzo the salamander was to be feared, even in old age. Cole stood in the middle of the room and looked to each of the Kage and the shogun of the samurai. Then, I as the Oracle of Six Paths, now recognize this alliance. I will support these nations as long as they remain a part of the alliance, and follow the codes we set down, he proclaimed before raising his hands before him. Between them, 5 black daggers were created from nothing and floated in the air. The gathered shinobi marveled at the abilities of the oracle as the daggers were sent to each of the leaders. These are my boons to each of you. Mifune, your blade will channel chakra to the point that it can create a blade that can extend to the heavens themselves. It will never dull and will always strike true, he told the samurai shogun. He turned to Inoki and bowed his head slightly. That blade will be able to channel your jutsu through it and effectively perform the intended jutsu near instantaneously without hand signs, he said before turning to Ai. Your blade acts like a lightning rod. It can store and channel lighting chakra and expel it at any time you command it to. Its range reaches over 60 meters and enhances lightning-based jutsu, he then turned to Mei. Your blade has the ability to turn into steam when chakra is applied to it, and will reform once the connection is stopped. It can be used as a smoke screen, or a means to get past and defense. And finally he turned to Tsunade. And your blade, Hokage-sama, enhances healing techniques when medical chakra is channeled through it. But, it can excrete a powerful poison when normal chakra is channeled through it, and can be released in a mist variant. He then turned to face them all at once. These are my boons, please accept them as well as my allegiance to your cause, and please, use my blessings with care. Chapter 117, Peace Shattered. He then turned to face them all at once. These are my boons, please accept them as well as my allegiance to your cause, and please, use my blessings with care. Hunter 1, report, a man behind a large oak desk said into his intercom. There was a slight crackle of static on the other end before the man was answered. This is Hunter 1, all clear. Suspected dead zone was evacuated before we arrived. It seemed to be an old training facility, but it was in pretty rough shape. It was most likely abandoned a while ago, few months I'd say. A masculine, if not lazy voice replied on the other end of the comm. The man behind the desk sighed as he ran his hands through his short-cropped blonde hair. Alright then, good work Hunter 1. Proceed with your return trip. Make sure that Hunters 2 to 3 both get the order to return home, he ordered the voice, earning an affirmative. The man pressed the end call button on the comm link, just before the door to his office opened up. Hokage-sama, I just got a report from the Tsuchi Hunter teams saying that their hunts were inconclusive, a tall man with long black hair pulled back into a tight ponytail said as he walked into the office. The man behind the desk sighed heavily and slumped into his chair. He ran a hand over his face and looked back to the black-haired man. What about Rai Hunter team, Shikamaru? He asked, earning a negative from the man. Shikamaru sighed as he pulled out a package of cigarettes and started to light one. He looked to his Hokage and held out his hand. Want one, Naruto? He asked. Naruto shook his head and started to stand. Sorry, Shika, but not now. I've got an appointment to go to, and I most definitely don't want to smell like smoke. He apologized before pulling on his Kage cloak and hat and walked towards the open window. Shikamaru rolled his eyes at the blonde and took a drag from his cigarette. Tell Hinata and Naru-sama I said hi, he said as he released the smoke. Naruto smirked back at his Jonin commander. Will do, he said before jumping from his window and out to the village he led. Shikamaru shook his head as he took another drag. Just like Jiraiya-sama. Just can't use a damn door to save his life. A blonde boy rushed to the door to his house along with his sister who had short indigo hair. They both wore large smiles on their faces as they opened the door, their 2 whisker marks stretching on their cheeks. Papa, they cried as the door opened and Naruto walked in. The blonde man smiled widely as his 2 children jumped into his arms. Hey Himachan, Boruto. You guys ready to go get some lunch? He asked the 2, earning vigorous nods from the 2. Naruto smiled and put them down. He put his hands on their heads and ruffled their hair. Alright then, we just gotta wait on Mama and Izumi-chan, he told the 2. He started to stand up before a feminine voice called out to him. Hey Naruto-kun. Sorry for the wait. Izumi-chan's hair was being uncooperative. Hinata said as she and a young preteen walked around the corner. The brown-haired girl put a hand behind her head and chuckled. Sorry about that, Dad, she said to the blonde. Naruto shrugged it off and poked her in the gut. Don't worry about it, Izumi-chan, he said as he snickered at how she involuntarily giggled from the poke. After she composed herself, she glared at her adoptive father. Mao! How many times do I have to tell you to not do that? She cried at him, hitting him in the chest. Boruto and Himawari both started to chuckle at the 2 while the blonde pointed at his father. Someone's in trouble, he said cheekily with a smirk. His smirk fell when a shadow cast over him and he slowly looked up. Oh, Hinata said to her middle child as she looked over him. Speaking of trouble, who was it that dumped paint on the Inazuka dog houses? Pink no less, she asked as she crossed her arms, sending a motherly glare at the boy. Boruto started to sweat as Izumi and Naruto both looked at the boy. Oh, they both said slowly. Izumi marched forward and dug her knuckles into the top of Boruto's head while Naruto stood back and watched with an emotionless expression. How many times do I have to tell you stop pranking the Inazuka, huh? She asked as she ground her knuckles into the poor boy's scalp a little harder. Ow, 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 ow. I'll stop. I'll stop, I swear, the boy cried. Himawari hid behind her mother and watched, helplessly as her brother got punished by their big sister. Niche and scary. She mumbled out. Alright guy, let's get a move on. Seinaru and Anko are waiting on us. Hinata said, trying to stifle off a giggle from how her eldest was acting. Hi, everyone said as they started to walk out of the estate. Naruto nudged Boruto on the shoulder, getting the blonde to look up at him. They looked at each other for a few seconds before they both gave a thumbs up. No one will ever know that the Hokage was the one to prank the Inazuka, and Boruto took the blame for some extra training time with the man. The Namikaze family walked up to the formerly small corner-side ramen stand known as Ichiraku's. But now, it stood as a full building with indoor and outdoor seating and a full staff of servers and chiefs. As the family walked in, they were greeted by the hostess and shown to their private table. Already sitting there was the Uzumaki family. Cole looked up from his menu and smiled at his eldest. Cole nudged Anko in the side, causing her to look up. The two of them stood up and walked over to Naruto and his family. "Hey brat, how have you been?" Cole said as he embraced his son in a fatherly hug. Naruto chuckled and patted his father on the back. "Been good, Dad, could be better, but I've been good," he said, just before Boruto and Himawari tried to tackle Cole to the ground. However, before they could make contact, the middle-aged man caught them in mid-air with his gravity control and let them float for a bit. He looked at them with a smirk as they flailed around in the air before crossing his arms. "Now, how many times do I have to tell you I ain't as young as I used to be? No need to jump on me, just give me a hug," he mock-scolded the two with a smirk. Boruto and Himawari both looked down with a mock pout before responding. "Sorry, Ji-chan," they both said in unison. Cole's eye twitched a bit from the name, but shrugged it off and hugged his grandchildren. "It's good to see you brats," he said to the two. Anko was trying to hold back her laughs from her husband being called old man, but it stopped dead when Izumi walked over to her. "Something funny back on?" the girl asked with a smirk. Anko froze for a moment before glaring at the girl, getting her to sweat a bit. "What was that, dear?" she asked the girl with a false sweet tone. "No, nothing, Anko-chan," she said to her grandmother, earning a nod from the woman. "Damn right it was nothing," she grumbled as they began to sit down. Izumi turned to Akira and Akari, who were sitting quietly, watching in amusement at their family's antics. After some conversation, the waiter came and took their order. Cole turned to his son while Anko was distracting the others with a story from work and nudged him in the arm. "So, any word on where they're hiding?" he asked his son in a hushed tone. Naruto shook his head and sighed. "They're slipperier than Orochimaru. Any luck on him, by the way?" he asked his father. Cole shook his head with a sigh. "No, even with the info we got from the Sound 4 we can't pinpoint his location. I have Jiraiya looking around with Yamato, but it's been 3 years since the last sighting and since then we've got nothing," he informed his son. Naruto cursed under his breath and shook his head. "I can't believe they'd hid from us for 9 years. Just what are they doing?" he wondered aloud to his father. Cole shook his head with a heavy sigh. "I have no idea. But I can only say this, I have a bad feeling that this time of peace will be ending soon." "So, is everything ready?" "Just about. We just need one more sample and the army will be complete." "Good. I trust that you will be able to control this many without a problem?" "Kukuku, with Kabuto-kun's help, 200 Edo Tensei soldiers will be easy." Good. I believe we should make ourselves known again, at Orochimaru." "Kukuku. I couldn't agree more, Tobi-san. Then let us show this world what despair really looks like." Chapter 119, Prelude to War. "So, is everything ready?" "Just about. We just need one more sample and the army will be complete." "Good. I trust that you will be able to control this many without a problem?" "Kukuku, with Kabuto-kun's help, 200 Edo Tensei soldiers will be easy." Good. I believe we should make ourselves known again, at Orochimaru." "Kukuku. I couldn't agree more, Tobi-san. Then let us show this world what despair really looks like." Explosions rocked throughout the night. Screams echoed each explosion and shinobi were on the move to investigate. Naruto woke up along with Hinata with a start. Instantly on his feet and putting on his clothes and readying his weapons. Hinata quickly got dressed along with him and went for the door to their room. "Go check on the kids. I'll see who has the balls to attack my village." Naruto growled in anger as he jumped out of the window to their room, leading 3 shadow clones with her and his defense clones rising from the earth, making a total of 53 clones with his wife and children. Along with the vast amounts of traps and defensive seals on the estate grounds, making the building one of the safest places in the world. Hinata nodded to her husband and tied her hitayate around her neck before grabbing a few kunai and hiding them away. "Let's go then," she said to the clones as she left the room just as Naruto left the building in a flash of golden light. The blonde Hokage appeared at the top of the Hokage monument and looked at his village. He scowled as he looked at the damage to his village. Somehow the little fucks that thought they could fuck with his village blew down a large portion of the walls without getting caught and had invaded his village. Well, if they thought they were going to survive the night, they had another thing coming. The Kage lifted a scroll up and unraveled it. Several seals were present on the scroll and he activated 3 of them. "Hayashi, Kakashi, Seinaru, you there?" he said as the 3 seals glowed a dull blue. "Hi!" A chorus of responses echoed out from the scroll as the 3 seals blinked and glowed even brighter as voices were transmitted through it. Early in his career, the blonde had issued a new seal to have on all shinobi above Jin in rank. It would be placed just behind the ear, and once Naruto activated the corresponding seal in his scroll, he could instantly talk to the person he needed. "Good, I need a sitrep on just what in the fuck is going on right now," he said in an authoritative tone. One he quickly adopted whenever he needed to be in control of a situation as Hokage. He could be the happy-go-lucky blonde Hokage when he wanted, or he could be the cold and deadly commander of a village of assassins if he needed to. And now was one of those times. We have contacts in several locations throughout the village. Total head count on the enemy is around 150. We have yet to identify any specific or unifying traits to their apparel or loyalties. Hayashi reported from his estate, while several Hyuga, along with himself, used their Byakugan to look throughout the village and get a sense for what's going on. "Anything else?" his Hokage asked him. "Just that they have a strange flux of chakra running through them. I have yet to see any of them lose chakra after using a jutsu," Hayashi reported. Naruto grunted and scowled at that. It was a familiar circumstance, but where had he seen it before? His questions were answered when his father reported in. "They're Edo Tensei. I repeat, we have an Edo Tensei infestation." Cole shouted as he ducked away from a volley of shuriken and returned with a quick Bansho Tenin to grab the closest reanimated shinobi and rip its soul from its fake body. "Hokage-sama, we need a squad of seal users on this and soon. I can beat them, but I can't be everywhere," he said as he demolished another enemy and dodged another in time to grab its head and remove it from the fight while he waited for the one he destroyed to reform. "Right," he acknowledged and activated another seal. "Shikaku. I need a squad of shinobi that can use seals ASAP. We've got Edo Tensei on our hands," he ordered his shinobi commander. Shikaku sighed on the other end and grunted. "I was already on it. But I'll need some help securing the Nara compound right now. We're almost overrun," he said as he and Shikamaru stood back to back, fending off a group of undead with their shadows. "Kakashi, you hear that?" Naruto said to his former sensei. "Loud and clear, I'm already en route," the white-haired, now reinstated Umbu, said as he leapt from roof to roof towards the commander. "All right, once you have that done, we counterattack and finish them quickly. For now, it's time for the cavalry to arrive," the Hokage said as he deactivated the seals and returned the scroll to its sealing space. Naruto scowled out at his burning village and growled. "I'll show them what it means to attack the things that are precious to me." Tajua Kagebunshin no Jutsu, he roared as hundreds of clones appeared and spread throughout the village. "You ready, Kurama?" he shouted as he jumped high into the air. "You know it, brat. Show them who stands on top of everyone else." The Kyuubi no Yoko howled out in rage and bloodlust. "Then let's get it on," Naruto shouted as he burst into golden light and donned his master-tailed beast cloak. "Mama, what's going on?" Himawari asked as she and Boruto were led through the house by Izumi to the family vault. "We're under attack, Hima-chan. But don't worry, as long as we're in the house and I am here, you'll be safe," Hinata told her daughter with conviction in her voice. "Izumi, take them into the vault and lock it from the inside. I'll handle anyone that tries to enter the estate," Hinata instructed her adopted daughter. "Oh, okay, Mom, but what if you need help?" she asked in worry. Hinata smiled at her and placed a hand on top of her head. "Don't worry, I'm stronger than I look," she said as she left to go protect the homestead. And don't forget about us, several Naruto clones cheered as she flanked their creator's wife. Izumi herded her younger siblings towards the vault and gave one last look to her mother as she closed the door. Good luck, Mom. And with that she closed the door and the protective seals that were placed on it activated, keeping anyone and anything out of the vault and hiding the door. Hinata took a deep breath before shrugging on her Jonin jacket and exited the house to guard the exterior from any assault. As soon as she and her entourage of clones exited the building, she saw her husband leap into the air and light up like the sun. One of the clones whistled as they watched him send hundreds of clones scatter throughout the village to intercept the enemy. Boss is really going all out. They must be really pissing him off, one said before they all stopped moving for a second as they viewed the memories of a popped clone. Several of the clones growled as they learned what they were up against as others phased into the ground and took position to protect the home. So, what are we up against? Hinata asked the clone that stood next to her and he narrowed his eyes. Edo Tensei, my lady. Seems we have a snake that needs to be skinned, he growled as he took up a defensive stance next to his original's wife. Hinata scowled and shook her head as she jumped to the top of the house. Byakugan, she called as her Keki Jinkai and viewed throughout the village. And what she saw made her gasp. There was well over 100 of them, and they were tearing through whoever went after them, save for the select few that could compete with them long enough to seal them away. The Nara compound was nearly overrun and the Yamanaka weren't too far behind. The other clans were already launching their counterattacks and trying to punch through them to help their comrades. Naruto's clones were facing off with various enemies throughout the village, and her father-in-law was decimating the few reanimated shinobi that dared block his path. But worst of all, there were 4 shinobi headed straight for her home. Hinata looked down to the few clones that remained in the open and began her instructions. We have incoming for shinobi and they're headed here fast. I need volleys of shuriken on them now so the sealing team can prep before they get here, she ordered the clones. Ma'am, yes ma'am, 30 clones called at once before they dashed for vantage points on their targets. And as one they launched their weapons before making the necessary hand signs. Shuriken Kagebunshin no Jutsu, they chorused, turning their already hail of metal into an inescapable torrent of blades. The 4 that were coming at them halted before one of the 4 started making hand signs. Hyutan, Hyohiki, he called before slamming his hands on the ground, forming a large wall of ice in the path of the shuriken, blocking the sea of blades. As the attack was blocked, the other 3 made their way over the wall and tried to enter the estate. All but one was blocked from entry, shocking the clones as well as Hinata. The one that made it through the barrier that was placed so many years ago was a woman. She had long flowing red hair that was tied back into a high ponytail with a Konoha Hitai tied across her forehead. Her features shook Hinata as well as the clones. She looked so familiar to Hinata, but her suspicions were confirmed as one of the clones began to stutter. Mom. Sochi. Chapter 120, Red-Hot Blooded Habanero. The one that made it through the barrier that was placed so many years ago was a woman. She had long flowing red hair that was tied back into a high ponytail with a Konoha Hitai tied across her forehead. Her features shook Hinata as well as the clones. She looked so familiar to Hinata, but her suspicions were confirmed as one of the clones began to stutter. Mom. Sochi. Hinata looked between the red-haired woman and her husband's clone with a raised eyebrow. What? She smartly asked in confusion. She had never seen any pictures of her deceased mother-in-law, but she had heard the descriptions, and upon closer evaluation, her Byakugan eyes widened. Oh Kami, you are Kushina, she said out loud as she looked at the woman before her. Uzumaki Kushina looked between the Naruto clone and Hinata before raising an eyebrow. So, do I have any grandbabies yet? She asked the 2, making Hinata blush slightly and the clone's eyes widen. Okay, so the first thing you say after meeting me is to ask about if I had kids yet? The clone mused as he looked at his boss's mother. After a moment he shrugged and looked at her with a grin. Yup, the old perv explained you down to AT, and yeah, I've got 3 beautiful kids, he said before his voice softened as he mentioned his children. The blonde's mother squealed in delight before pointing at Hinata, making Naruto nod, and again making Kushina squeal. Yay! I'm a grandmama, she yelled in delight while she bounced around in place. Hinata looked at Naruto and held back a snort of amusement. Just like you, she squeaked out, trying not to laugh. He husband's clone didn't have that luxury, he just flat out belted out into laughter and began to roll on the floor. Oh! By the sage, it's too much. She's just like us, he laughed out as he rolled around, but his laughter soon ended when a chain burst out from the ground under him, piercing his chest and sending him off in a plume of smoke. Sorry, Kushina called as she started to enter a combat position. You might want to defend yourself, she warned as she drew her sword from its place on her back and pointed it at Hinata in a two-handled grip. I can't control my body anymore, so here I come, she yelled out as she began to charge forward. Hinata set into a low stance of her own version of the Jukin. Right, she called back as chakra poured into her palms and ready to be used. Kushina's sword swathed itself in red chakra and began to glow with heat. Careful! This blade is superheated using the Kyuubi's chakra. It can cut through almost anything, she warned before making an overhead swing down on her daughter-in-law. Hinata rolled to her right to avoid the burning blade and readjusted her stance once she was standing. Hakusho! She exclaimed as she sent a powerful vacuum palm out towards her undead mother-in-law. Kushina recovered from her missed attack and jumped straight over the blast of air, intent of making a falling slash at the Namake's mistress. But before she could make her attempt, she was knocked out of the air by a powerful knee to the side. The red-haired woman went flying as she slid across the ground to a stop, quickly rolling to her feet to see who just intercepted her attack. And to her undead surprise, clones of her son were coming out of the ground in droves. Whoa, that's a lot of clones there, Sochi? But I hope they're strong enough to handle me, she said aloud in respect for the large amount of shadow clones around her. 'Cause I'm about to up my game a bit. Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, she called out and disappeared in a large burst of smoke. Before Hinata could react, 5 red-haired clones dashed from the smoke and charged straight for her, while another 5 went after the small army of Narutos within the compound. Before the 5 could reach her though, a tri-pronged kunai flew in front of them, making them stop and each take a Rasengan to the gut, courtesy of 5 loyal clones. The original Kushina and the other 5 continued to fight with the small army, but were heavily outmatched. Soon after engaging, 3 of the clones were dispatched with ease, along with the original taking a Otama Rasengan to the side, sending her into the walls of the estate, which only stayed standing due to the several seals Naruto and Cole had placed on the building. The 2 remaining clones tried to gain distance, but were stopped when Hinata caught them both in the head with chakra-covered palms. Kushina slowly started to reform as one of the clones looked to one of the windows of the house. "How's it coming, guys?" he yelled, earning a grunt in response. Just a few more minutes before the seal's ready, a clone from inside the house called. The clone that asked sighed a bit and looked down to his original's slowly reforming mother. "So, Sochi, just how old are you right now?" Kushina asked as her right arm finished reforming and began to stand. The clone shrugged and looked a little bored. 26, he replied as he and his brothers ready for another round. "Ah, you're already older than mommy," Kushina whined before her eyes went wide. "Oh, I thought I wouldn't be able to do this after having him extracted." "Watch out! I'm getting a bijou cloak," she warned as red bubbling chakra formed around her body, taking the shape of Kurama, with 3 tails lazily waving behind her. "Well, crap," one of the clones said as they sunk a little lower into their stances, all holding Hirashin kunai, preparing for a slightly more difficult fight ahead. Kushina's hands went to her head as her body began to tremble. "Grrrahhhh," she roared as a 4th tail appeared and she began to fall into the second form cloak. "Oh no you don't," one of the clones said, enticing the rest to roar a loud battle cry before they all flashed towards their transforming mother. "Na," they roared as Kushina was launched into the air with a flurry of kicks to the stomach. "Are you?" was called as 3 clones pegged her in the side with fast and hard punches, sending her sailing through the air. "To!" more yelled as they drop-kicked her towards the ground, where 4 clones waited, all holding Otama Raisingans in their hands. "This hurts us a whole lot more than you, Mom," they yelled before they made to strike her. "Namikaze barrage," the four yelled as they rammed the Raisingans into her, sending Kushina once again flying back into the house, the slowly forming cloak gone due to the damage. As Kushina began to reform, Hinata dashed forward with her hands raised. Kushina slowly stood up, just as Hinata readied her attack. "Juho Sashiken," she called as her palms were engulfed in chakra, taking the forms of lions. She slammed her palms into Kushina's torso, crushing her against the house, leaving her body stunned for a long moment. "Now," she called to the ceiling clones. "Ma'am, yes ma'am," they confirmed before one jumped forward, seal in hand, slapping it onto Kushina's forehead. Once the seal touched its mark, seals began to spread over her body, keeping her completely paralyzed and immobile. "Yosh! Gotcha!" the clone cheered before he turned to Hinata. "Gotta go report this to boss man, goodbye m'lady," he said with a bow, making Hinata giggle slightly before he dispelled himself. Hinata looked down to their new captive with an awkward smile. "So, I guess we have some introductions to do," she said, gaining a smirk from Kushina. "Yup," she said with a smile. "So, who are you? How's this you meet my little Naruto-kun? What are my grandbabies like? When'd you get married?" Hinata suppressed a groan as Kushina continued to list off questions. They are far too alike. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching and peace.